Chapter 1585. Before becoming a soul overlord, soul demons rarely had physical bodies. Most of them attached themselves to humans or savage beasts to reproduce and evolve. However, once a soul demon became a soul overlord, all the energy they had accumulated before would erupt in an instant. It would form the fleshly body of a soul demon, which was the true body of a soul overlord. However, Soul 13 had never wanted to expose this fleshly body, mainly because once it was exposed, his aura would leak out, and he would lose his mind and be completely trapped by the gluttony demon lord's will. All he knew was to eat, eat, and eat. This process would last for a long time, perhaps a year or perhaps 10,000 years. Only with the accumulation of time could a berserk will regain its clarity. Of course, the main thing was that his aura would leak out, which was what Soul 13 did not want to see. Once it did, the soul overlords in the soul demon universe would be able to sense his aura. At that time, those soul overlords would do everything they could to come to this chaotic universe. By robbing him of his merits, he would have been able to win the soul god's favor, but now his merits had completely changed hands. After all, he was still very weak against a veteran top soul overlord. Roar. A terrible roar seemed to shake the whole universe. The starry sky was shaking, and the rivers of stars were rolling backward. Bufang's pupils constricted. Standing on the bumpy surface of the planet that had turned into ruins, he stared at the terrible savage beast that was slowly crawling out of a deep pit. Compared to Soul 13, this savage beast terrified him even more. Bufang felt as if all the pores on his body were constricting under the beast's gaze. He did not expect that after killing Soul 13, there would be an even more ferocious existence. The Lord Go was now in a deep sleep, so it was impossible for him to unleash the strength of a heaven god to help him again. Now, he could only solve this big problem by himself. Rumble! The ferocious beast's body wasn't huge, but when it stepped on the ground would collapse and explode. Even the boiling magma in the depths of the planet's core seemed to be triggered and became violent. Magma continuously gushed out from the cracked ground. The terrible savage beast, shrouded in the pitch-black power of sin, stepped forward like a peerless ferocious beast, bringing disaster with it. Boom! Pillars of magma rose into the sky one after another. That pitch-black ominous beast opened its mouth, and a suction force seemed to exist in its mouth. The magma frantically drilled into the ominous beast's mouth. "What is this?" Bufang frowned. With a stomp of his foot, his body seemed to have teleported, and in the blink of an eye, he was far away. He grabbed Lord Go's body and threw the sleeping Lord Go into the heaven and earth farmland. Then, he soared into the sky. The ferocious beast did not chase after Bufang. Instead, it opened its mouth wide and sucked the lava that burst out from the star core. That was scorching lava. Even god-kings would not be able to endure the heat of the lava. But this vicious beast was eating happily as if it was drinking water. This scene was shocking. The pitch-black sinful energy wrapped around the planet, seemingly corroding it. Bang! 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 There was only a limited amount of lava, and it was sucked into the beast's mouth. Meanwhile, the planet's ground cracked, and pieces of the earth crumbled and flew into the air as the beast devoured them. A savage beast that could devour stars, no wonder it was called Gluttony Soul Overlord. Hovering in the starry sky, Bufang was also a little dumbfounded as he watched. Suddenly Bufang seemed to sense something. He jerked his head up and looked into the depths of the starry sky. Because of the Gluttony Soul Overlord's aura, Bufang felt as if there were existences spying on him from afar in the depths of the starry sky. Their eyes were filled with brutality and bloodlust. In fact, the look in their eyes was exactly the same as the Gluttony Soul Overlord's. Bufang's heart sank. An unparalleled pressure almost suffocated him. The 7 sins, could it be that those spying on him are the soul demon universe that Soul 13 was born in? Bufang sucked in a cold breath. As soon as the idea came to his mind, he felt a little terrified. Soul 13 had just become a soul overlord, but he was already so powerful and invincible. If the veteran soul overlords of the soul demon universe passed through the cosmic barrier and appeared in this world, that would be a real disaster for this world. In this universe, the modern-day heaven gods did not show up, and even if they did, they might not be a match for those veteran soul overlords. Not to mention Bufang had guessed from Soul 13 that there was a soul god, who was even more powerful than the soul overlord. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. It was as if he could not stop his heart from trembling at the thought of this name. The spying in the depths of the universe came and went quickly, as if it did not want to arouse anyone's vigilance, so it had stopped. Bufang exhaled, turned his head, and looked into the distance. There, the gluttony soul overlord had swallowed the whole planet, but his body did not show any signs of growing bigger. However, his body did not show any signs of growing bigger. His tiny body had eaten an entire planet, yet he did not feel bloated at all. His stomach was made of iron. Buzz, suddenly, the gluttony soul overlord raised his head. His scarlet eyes were filled with violence and ferocity as he fixed them on Bufang. Or rather, they were fixed on the Xiai divine dynasty behind Bufang. To the soul demons, the humans in the divine dynasty were tantamount to delicious food. The gluttony soul overlord could not help but drool. Swoosh! The wings on his back spread. Then, he flapped them. Like a beam of black light, he swept across the sky in a flash and pressed down on the Xiai divine dynasty. In the Xiai divine dynasty, the humans, who had suppressed the soul demons, shuddered. Everyone felt a terrible aura looming over their heads. Subconsciously, they looked up. Then, they saw the monster with the big mouth that seemed to have become the center of the starry sky. What's that? What a terrible aura! I feel the aura of death, gulp. This aura is even stronger than Soul 13's. The human expert's expressions changed dramatically. The Xiai Divine Emperor felt a chill run down his spine. Wasn't Soul 13 killed? How could there still be such a terrible soul demon? You stood on the top of the Luo family's skyscraper, frowning. The gluttony soul overlord hovered over the capital, his nose twitching. His huge mouth was like a bottomless pit. Suddenly, his scarlet eyes turned and rested on the Luo family's skyscraper. There you was standing. The gluttony soul overlord's first target was actually Nethery. No one had expected this. Roar. Gluttony soul overlord's roar shook the whole capital of the Xiai divine dynasty. Slash. Suddenly, a tongue shot out of the soul overlord's mouth like a bolt of lightning. Then, it sped toward you. Its speed was extremely fast. You felt cold all over. Being targeted by the soul overlord, she could not even move her body. An aura of death suddenly approached. The gluttony soul overlord's eyes gleamed with greed. He had lost his rationality now, and all that was left was his will, which was dominated by gluttony, one of the 7 sins. He wanted to eat all over the universe. Rumble! Just as the tongue was about to pierce Yu's head, Bufang's figure suddenly appeared. He raised his Taotai arm and grabbed the tongue. One end of the tongue was in Bufang's hand, and the other end was in the gluttony soul overlord's mouth. The soul overlord rolled his eyes, then began to pull the tongue back. Bufang could not resist the great force pulling him, so he was pulled toward the gluttony soul overlord's mouth by the tongue. The gluttony soul overlord did not care who was in his way. He would eat them all. The humans turned pale. Now Bufang was their only hope. If even Bufang was eaten, no one would be able to stop the gluttony soul overlord. Bufang fixed his eyes on the gluttony soul overlord. Looking at the soul overlord's flesh trembling, he raised his eyebrows. I wonder how this soul overlord's flesh is like? I wonder if it's better than dragon meat, Bufang murmured. However, when his murmur was heard by the crowd, it caused an uproar. Why is he still thinking about ingredients at a time like this? This gluttony soul overlord is stronger than Soul 13. Without Lord Go, only Bufang could stop him. Gluttony Soul Overlord's mouth was wide open, and inside it were rows of sharp teeth. They could chew through everything in heaven and earth. Once Bufang fell into his mouth, he would be completely crushed. The god of cooking's eye Bufang's eyes burst into golden light as he looked over. He wanted to find the Soul Overlord's weakness. However, after activating the god of cooking's eye, Bufang found that this Soul Overlord had even fewer weaknesses than Soul 13. He only had 2 weaknesses, and neither of them was outside his body, but inside his body. What should he do? Since he could not attack him from the outside, Bufang did not know how to deal with this Soul Overlord. Buzz, the 5 supreme laws of the universe gathered on his Taotai arm. Bufang's fist fell from the sky like a burning silver divine flame. Boom! The fist bypassed Gluttony Soul Overlord's mouth and hit his chin. The blow, which contained the 5 supreme laws of the universe, threw the Soul Overlord into the air. However, it did not penetrate the Soul Overlord's chin. Rolling his eyes, the Soul Overlord locked onto Bufang's body again. A ripping sound rang out. Suddenly, the Soul Overlord's tail swept over. Bufang frowned. The black turtle constellation walk floated up to his side. Dong! A loud noise rang out. The black turtle constellation walk was smashed onto Bufang's body. It knocked Bufang flying backward and smashed him hard on the ground in the distance. He rolled on the ground for a few times. Shaking his vermilion robe, Bufang looked up at the Soul Overlord. The weakness is inside. If that's the case. A thought flashed through Bufang's mind. The black turtle constellation walk, the white tiger heaven stove, and the god of cooking set appeared. He began to cook on the spot. Flames surged and steam rose to the sky. Before long, a bowl of divine fire snail rice noodles was formed. Of course, 1 bowl of divine fire snail rice noodles was not enough. Bufang also took out the perishing pot and the death sword pot. Then, he put stinky tofu in both pot. The stench was overwhelming, but it was a fatal temptation to soul demons. Since he was going to attack from the inside, he would let this Gluttony Soul Overlord have the pleasure of having an exploding appetite. Bufang kicked the ground with the tip of his foot and soared into the sky in an instant, hovering in midair. Around his body, the divine fire snail rice noodles, the perishing pot of stinky tofu, and the death sword pot of stinky tofu were hovering in midair. The Gluttony Soul Overlord's scarlet eyes turned and fixed on Bufang. Or rather, his gaze was fixed on the 3 dishes hovering around Bufang. The stench was overwhelming, but to him it was a fatal temptation. Roar! The Gluttony Soul Overlord roared. The muscles in his mouth were twitching, and a powerful suction force exploded out. The hem of Bufang's vermilion robe fluttered toward the spot where the Soul Overlord was sucking. He flicked his finger. The 3 dishes shot out like streams of light and rushed toward the Soul Overlord at the same time. The Soul Overlord did not refuse any of them. Bufang opened his mouth wide. The divine fire snail rice noodles were the first to enter his stomach. Then, the stinky tofu, the perishing pot, and the death sword pot were devoured as well. He breathed a sigh of relief. Bufang's divine sense surged and his eyes narrowed. If you want to eat, eat more. As soon as he said that, Bufang raised his hand and pointed at the Soul Overlord. His lips parted slightly. Explode. Chapter 1586. Facing the Gluttony Soul Overlord, whose only weakness was his stomach, Bufang chose to attack from the inside. Perhaps an internal explosion could cause some damage to the Soul Overlord. But it would not be easy to break it from the outside. After all, the Gluttony Soul Overlord was a Soul Overlord, on the same level as a heaven god. It would not be easy for Bufang to break his defense. Bufang raised his hand, opened his mouth, and spat out an explosion. The Gluttony Soul Overlord swallowed the divine fire snail rice powder, the perishing pot, and the death sword pot. These 3 dishes were not only delicious, but their destructive power was also unparalleled. As Bufang's strength improved, so did the power of the perishing pot and the death sword pot. The explosion was so powerful that it could even shatter a star. Boom! A muffled rumble rang out as if it came from the depths of the universe. Suddenly, the gluttony soul overlord's stomach shook violently and swelled up completely, becoming very huge in an instant, and kept expanding. Then it began to distort and burst. Everyone raised their heads and looked at this scene in disbelief. Now they could only pin their hopes on Bufang. Perhaps Bufang could fight the gluttony soul overlord. After all, Bufang had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. With him, anything was possible. Many people clenched their fists. They were hoping that the explosion could kill the huge gluttony soul overlord, even though he was a heaven god. But soon they were disappointed. The gluttony soul overlord did not explode. Even an explosion of that magnitude only made him squirm a little uncomfortably. A gluttony soul overlord, who could devour heaven and earth, and even an entire star, was not so easy to deal with. Burp in the sky. The gluttony soul overlord's body was constantly recovering. He opened his mouth and let out a burp. Amidst the burp, there was a stench and the smoke from the explosion. Bufang stood in the sky with his hands clasped behind his back. He did not expect that such a trick could not hurt the soul overlord at all. It was enough to show how strong the soul overlord's defense was and how tough his flesh was. Bufang also had a headache. Gluttony soul overlord's teeth gleamed with sharpness, while the soul demons cheered. Spirit overlords were indeed invincible. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord's tongue shot out again toward Bufang and Yu. To gluttony soul overlord, Yu's cursed body is as good as divine flame snail rice noodles. As for Bufang, he was ignored. To him, Bufang was no different from an ordinary human ingredient. His target is still Yu. The sharp tongue was like an arrow piercing through the air, constantly piercing through the void and causing it to explode. This power was extremely terrifying. How should he deal with this gluttony soul overlord? Bufang felt a headache coming on, and he couldn't help but furrow his brows. He had used all kinds of tricks, but none of them seemed to be effective against the gluttony soul overlord, who had thick skin and flesh. If he allowed this beast to continue wreaking havoc, the whole chaotic universe would be thrown into chaos. Facing the tongue that was shooting toward you, Bufang once again reached out his Taotai arm and grabbed it. The dragon bone kitchen knife rolled up. Then, he slashed it down. However, when it hit the tongue, it only produced a clanging sound as if it had hit a sharp metal. A ripping sound rang out. The tongue lashed out. Boom! The tongue that streaked across the ground left a deep pit in the ground. Its power was extremely terrifying. In the sky, the gluttony soul overlord was roaring. He seemed a little angry because he had been stopped from tasting delicious food again and again. Roar! He opened his mouth full of sharp teeth and let out a roar. Blasts of air blasted out and kept gushing out. Then, his scarlet eyes seemed to be surging with killing intent. His body bobbed up and down as if he was about to swoop down. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. The 5 supreme laws of the universe swirled around him and gathered in his arm. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the gluttony soul overlord, threw out a punch, and hit him hard on the chin. The punch sent the soul overlord flying. However, this kind of attack did not hurt the gluttony soul overlord at all. It only angered the soul overlord even more. Bufang felt a headache coming on. Even the dragon bone kitchen knife could not break the gluttony soul overlord's defense. Bufang did not know what to do. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord's tail lashed out. Bufang raised his hand to block it. With a rumble, he was sent flying backward. The air was compressed and he smashed hard into the ground. The impact created a huge pit in the ground. The gluttony soul overlord was too strong. The force of his tail was enough to smash a god emperor. The faces of the humans turned pale. What should they do? How could they block it? Crash, rubble rolled down. Bufang got up from the rubble, shook his body, and shook off the dust on him. Bufang grabbed the Qilin transmigration ladle at his waist. Buzz, he calmed his mind and sank into his spirit sea. Inside Bufang's spirit sea, the god of cooking's menu floated quietly, and the true form of his divine sense sat cross-legged on it. In the vast spirit sea, the huge Qilin lay in it. As if sensing Bufang's arrival, the Qilin opened his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and his lantern-like eyes stared at Bufang. "You came here to possess me, didn't you?" he asked. It was as if he could see through Bufang's mind. In fact, in addition to crushing the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop, Bufang still had the Qilin as his trump card. The Qilin was a perfected artifact spirit. His strength was unfathomable. Once he possessed him, with Bufang's current strength, the fighting prowess he could unleash should be doubled. It should not be a problem for him to deal with that gluttony soul overlord. Bufang nodded expressionlessly. In fact, possessing someone is not a good technique. It has too many limitations, and I can't really unleash my strength. So, under normal circumstances, I don't like possessing someone. The Qilin shook his head. However, the Qilin suddenly stood up. His body was so huge that it seemed to blot out the sky. "But I can smell a tempting smell from that big guy outside, so I agree," he said. As soon as his voice rang out, he raised his paw. The huge claw let out a rumbling sound as it swatted at Bufang. Finally, he gently touched Bufang's forehead. Buzz, as he stood up from the rubble, the look in Bufang's eyes changed in an instant. Then, Bufang's hair changed as well, turning from black to purple. He shook his head, and his hair fluttered. The corners of purple-haired Bufang's mouth curved upward in an evil smile. He raised his hand, looked at his palm, and twisted his neck. "It's been a long time since I experienced this feeling of possessing someone. It's really wonderful," said purple-haired Bufang. Roar. In the sky, the gluttony soul overlord seemed to be provoked by Bufang. At this moment, he fixed his eyes on Bufang and let out a furious roar. Although he lacked consciousness and intelligence, his strength and fighting instinct were enough to crush everything. This was the horror of soul demons. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord took the initiative. His body was not very large, and it seemed inconvenient for him to move. But when he moved, he appeared in front of purple-haired Bufang like a bolt of lightning. Then, he slapped down with his paw. He wanted to completely flatten purple-haired Bufang. "I can feel it. The delicious smell emanating from the depths of your soul intoxicates me," purple-haired Bufang said, grinning. The next moment, he raised a palm. Boom! The gluttony soul overlord's paw collided with Bufang's palm. The entire ground caved in again, and gravel flew everywhere. However, the purple-haired Bufang was hovering in place, motionless. The gluttony soul overlord's attack did not even push him back. This scene caused everyone to be shocked. Qilin love to win people over with virtue. If you smile, I'll spare your life. Purple-haired Bufang tilted his head and said. He was in a good mood after coming out to make a name for himself. Roar. The gluttony soul lord opened his mouth and roared. Then, he opened his mouth wide, aiming to bite the purple-haired Bufang. Purple-haired Bufang shook his head and sighed regretfully. He held a ladle in his hand. Holding it with one hand, he smashed it toward the gluttony soul overlord's mouth. Bang! It was an accurate blow, and it smashed hard on gluttony soul overlord's chin. The gluttony soul overlord was struck dumb. His body flew high into the air, and in a flash, he soared into the starry sky. The strength of the ladle was somewhat unexpected. His fingers danced. The Qilin transmigration ladle spun in purple-haired Bufang's hand. 18 Qilin transmigration ladles, purple-haired Bufang said. Then, a terrible aura spread from his body. Like an ancient bestial roar, Bufang's figure soared into the starry sky. The shadow of a huge ladle emerged behind him. Holding the ladle, the purple-haired Bufang smashed it toward the gluttony soul overlord in the distance. Every time the ladle hit, the gluttony soul overlord howled miserably. The soul overlord was so angry that he wanted to swallow the ladle. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, the ladle was shoved into his mouth, breaking a few of his teeth. Bang! 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 Every time the purple-haired Bufang smashed the ladle, the gluttony soul overlord was a little dumbfounded. The Chilan transmigration ladle seemed to have some magical power. Whenever it hit his body, his indestructible fleshly body seemed to be in severe pain. One ladle after another, the gluttony soul overlord, like a raging lion, was smashed into a docile kitten. He lay in the starry sky, not daring to move. "This thing's skin is really rough and thick," purple-haired Bufang murmured, frowning. He held the ladle in his hand. Suddenly, the gluttony soul overlord, who was lying in the starry sky, leaped up. His mouth kept growing bigger and bigger, as if it could swallow the whole starry sky in an instant. Purple-haired Bufang turned his head in confusion, and in a flash, he was enveloped by the huge mouth. Just like that, Bufang was swallowed. Everyone was stunned. Yu's pupils constricted. The Xiai Divine Emperor shuddered. What's going on? Is Bufang eaten? Among the humans, many people let out cries of alarm and wails. How did Bufang get eaten? That's the gluttony soul overlord. How could he survive after being eaten? The soul demons, on the other hand, were so excited that they were all shouting. That damned chef is finally eaten. Without that troublesome chef, the soul demons would surely win the battle. The war was about to come to an end. The gluttony soul overlord seemed to be very happy after eating Bufang. He roared in the starry sky to show his might. He even wanted to completely crush Bufang. The gluttony soul overlord was still shooting through the starry sky. He smashed many stars and forcefully swallowed them into his mouth, swallowing them one bite at a time. Everyone was in despair. It was all over. But was it really over? The gluttony soul overlord stretched out his long tongue. The ferocious look in his eyes soared. Then, it shot out and sped toward you. Without this annoying guy to disturb him, he could finally have a good meal. However, just as the tongue was about to touch you, the gluttony soul overlord's eyes went wide. His tongue also stiffened in the air. A faint voice rang out from his stomach. Chapter 1587. You're very naughty. I can't believe you actually ate me. A faint voice rang out of the gluttony soul overlord's belly and soon resounded through the starry sky. Everyone was taken aback. Bufang was not dead? He was eaten by the gluttony soul overlord, and he was still alive? The gluttony soul overlord's tongue, which was reaching toward you, froze as if he had been petrified. His eyes rolled, and then the light in his eyes grew even brighter. Bam! The sound of something knocking on his stomach rang out. The gluttony soul overlord let out a miserable howl. In the eyes of the crowd, gluttony soul overlord's body kept bulging in irregular shapes, as if someone was about to break out of his stomach. It was Bufang. It was definitely Bufang. A look of hope came over the Xiai Divine Emperor's face. Just when he thought Bufang was killed, and everything was about to end, Bufang had once again created a miracle for him. This miraculous chef had broken everyone's understanding time and time again. The gluttony soul overlord's body kept twisting in midair. Perhaps even he himself did not know that his weakness existed within his body. He thought that by swallowing Bufang with pride, he was speeding up his own death. Bufang, who was possessed by Chilan, was even more skillful in dealing with him. Swish, the gluttony soul overlord opened his mouth and spat out a pitch-black liquid. However, as the liquid splattered across the starry sky, Bufang's body did not appear. It seemed that Bufang was stuck in his stomach and would not leave. The gluttony soul overlord panicked a little. He reached out a hand and tried to dig Bu Fong out of the gluttony soul overlord's mouth. His sharp claws went deep into the gluttony soul overlord's stomach, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not dig Bu Fong out. Rumble! His back bulged once again, but this time, there were cracks all over it. The scene was horrifying to the gluttony soul overlord. He kept roaring and struggling in the void. His body streaked across the vast sky, constantly crashing into the stars and shattering them. The entire starry sky seemed to be in chaos at this moment. The soul demons were struck dumb, and they suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Was the gluttony soul overlord about to die? Once gluttony soul overlord was killed, none of them would be able to leave. The great land that they had conquered would be returned to these humans. To them, this was something unimaginable. To them, these humans were delicious food. Once the soul overlord failed, the food would leave them. It was an indescribable pain. Bang! Gluttony soul overlord smashed viciously into a star, which cracked and cracked. The gluttony soul overlord stopped moving. His back was torn open. A cracking sound rang out. Then, with a bang, it exploded. His weakness had been attacked from the inside by Bu Fong and torn apart. Pitch-black sinful energy gushed out of him. At this moment, this peerless ferocious beast was on the verge of death. It was like a deflated balloon deflating in an instant. His ferocity, violence, and insufferably arrogance, all of them disappeared completely at this moment. Rip! His back split open. A figure slowly walked out of it. Bu Fong's body was untainted by even a speck of dust. His purple hair fluttered, his eyes were evil, and the corners of his mouth were slightly curved upward. The gluttony soul overlord's choice to devour him was simply the worst decision. Gluttony soul overlord's aura was weak. His weakness was exposed, and his true form was affected. Originally, even if his fleshly body was completely crushed, he could still be reborn from a single drop of blood. But now that his weakness was exposed, it affected his soul. He could not even be reborn from a single drop of blood. It was as if the connection between this fleshly body and his true form had been completely cut off. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. Roar! The gluttony soul overlord opened his mouth and wanted to roar again. Purple-haired Bu Fong raised his hand and knocked the soul overlord on the head. He knocked the gluttony soul overlord to the ground. Ugh! If little host hadn't taken a fancy to your flesh, I would have smashed you with a spoon. Purple-haired Bu Fong glanced at the soul overlord, who had fallen to the ground and was motionless. Purple-haired Bu Fong also had a look of excitement in his eyes. Buzz! Suddenly, a wisp of black smoke began to spread from the soul overlord's body. In the next moment, it turned into a human figure. It was Soul 13's true form, which was shrouded in smoke and could not be seen clearly. But Bu Fong could feel that it was Soul 13's true form. Finally, this fellow's soul demon true form was revealed. Purple-haired Bu Fong twitched the corner of his mouth. All of a sudden, Bu Fong's purple hair changed color, returning to its original black color. Roar! Behind Bu Fong, a behemoth rushed up with a rumble. It was a purple qilin, huge, majestic, and filled with a terrible oppressive aura. After Soul 13's true form left the gluttony soul overlord's body, he regained his consciousness. He looked around blankly. What he saw was the qilin's lantern-like eyes and Bu Fong's expressionless face. Everything around him, including the broken stars and the crumbling starry sky, down below, the human experts and soul demons were staring at him with their mouths wide open. Soul 13's heart sank. He saw his own lifeless body. Damn it! Did I fail? How is this possible? I've exposed my hidden body, which will destroy and devour everything once it's out. Soul 13 had been waiting for the day he regained his consciousness. But to his surprise, he had regained his consciousness so quickly. Unfortunately, all he had left was his true form. The qilin's nose twitched, then he opened his mouth, from which saliva trickled down. His saliva dripped down in droplet. Although the saliva was invisible, Bufang could not help but glance at the Qilin. Almighty One, be more reserved, Bufang said. You'll scare me like this. The Qilin smacked his lips and then burst out laughing. The familiar, demonic laughter made the corner of Bufang's mouth twitch. Soul 13 sensed the aura of death from the Qilin. It was the natural reaction of a prey. He gave Bufang a deep look, then turned around and fled without hesitation. As long as there was life, there was hope. As long as his true form still existed, he could continue to possess others and be reborn. At that time, he would be a soul overlord who could destroy heaven and earth. So he was not willing to die like this. As a soul overlord, he did not think Bufang could stop him if he wanted to escape. Although Bufang was bizarre, he was only a god-emperor. He had not become a heaven god yet, so he thought he could escape. Even if he could not defeat Bufang, he could still run away. If that were the case, he would be too aggrieved as a soul overlord. Rumble. A pitch-black aura of sin filled the air. Without hesitation, Soul 13 turned and flew toward the depths of the starry sky. You want to leave? The Qilin's eyes narrowed. His saliva kept dripping from his mouth. He raised his hoof. The next moment, he slapped at the void. The hoof seemed to pierce through the void, and when it reappeared, it was right above Soul 13's head. It smashed down with a thud. Soul 13's fleeing body froze in an instant. It was as if an electric current had run through him. The fear in his heart grew stronger. Damn it! Damn it! What kind of existence is this? Soul 13 came to his senses and tried to flee like a madman. He did not want to stay in this place for a moment longer. However, he really could not escape this time. After the hoof, the Qilin came the Qilin's claw. The claw fell, grabbed Soul 13's neck, and lifted him up to the Qilin. The Qilin's eyes flashed, and he seemed a little excited. His long whiskers curled slightly, fell on Soul 13's face, and gently stroked it. Soul 13 was about to cry. He found that the savage beast in front of him was looking at him as if he was a delicious dish. Is it really so terrifying? Could it be that this ferocious beast was really going to eat him? He was a soul overlord. A soul overlord who stood at the top of the chaotic universe. How could he be eaten? How is this possible? Ah! Before Soul 13 could finish his thought, the Qilin opened his mouth and stuffed Soul 13 into it, bit by bit, until he was completely stuffed. Then, he closed his mouth and chewed for a while. Soul 13's true form was swallowed by the Qilin. Bufang stared blankly at the scene. This big boss is indeed a big boss. No wonder all the other artifact spirits call him Big Boss. His ferocious appearance is well-deserved. The Qilin burped. Then, he exchanged a look with Bufang and seemed somewhat satisfied. Then, he turned into a beam of purple light and returned to Bufang's spirit sea. As for Soul 13, he had become a thing of the past. In the Xiaoyu Divine Dynasty, everyone stared blankly at what was happening in the starry sky. The scene completely stunned them, and they didn't know what to say. That was a soul overlord. The supreme soul overlord, an existence comparable to a heaven god, was swallowed just like that. Although it was ferocious, why did everyone feel inexplicably refreshed? On the soul demon's side, all the soul demons were chilled. Knowing that they had lost the battle, the numbered soul demons turned and fled without hesitation. It would be best if they could escape. As long as they survived, they would have a chance to make a comeback. The soul demons' reproduction speed was very fast, and as long as they had enough flesh and blood, it would not slow down. The retreat of the soul demons attracted the humans' attention. The Xiaoyu Divine Emperor's eyes turned red. You want to run? Don't even think about it. Everyone, come with me. Kill him. The Divine Emperor bellowed. The golden armor on his body grew brighter and brighter. Then, he soared into the sky and rushed into the soul demon's camp. The soul demons, who had lost their fighting spirit, were nothing to be afraid of. The humans were in high spirits and full of fighting spirit. The Xiai Crown Prince's energy soared into the sky. The Titan Crown Prince roared loudly, venting the excitement and sorrow in his heart. Imo and Xiao Yanyu also joined the battle. For a moment, the humans sounded the horn of a counterattack. The Qilin had returned. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang stood on the broken star. In front of him was the corpse of the gluttony soul overlord. Or rather, it was a heaven god level ingredient. Of course, the premise was that Bufang had to consider whether it was edible or not. The fleshly body of a soul overlord was the condensation of essence. Not only did it have superb defense, but its energy content was also extraordinary. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in Bufang's hand. Holding the knife, Bufang cut off a piece of meat from the gluttony soul overlord's thigh. Because it had lost its true form, the fleshly body's defense was greatly weakened, so Bufang could easily cut it off. Looking carefully at the piece of meat, Bufang found that it was somewhat similar to the flesh of a squid. Apart from the hard outer shell, the tender meat inside was similar to that of a squid. Of course, the energy content was naturally incomparable. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Bufang put away the meat. As for the soul overlord's body, Bufang put it into the system's storage space. Bufang did not put it into the heaven and earth farmland because he was afraid that something would happen to the soul overlord's body. Of course, the most important thing was that as his strength improved, the heaven and earth farmland was also undergoing earth-shaking changes. This change would last for a while. Bufang exhaled deeply. Standing on the broken star, Bufang looked up at the Xiai divine dynasty, which was covered in smoke. The corner of his mouth curved upward. The calamity of the soul demons is finally over. Now that this was over, it was time for Bufang to start preparing to find the artifact spirits of the god of cooking sets. Moreover, Bufang had an intuition that it would not be easy to find the artifact spirits first. Moreover, the throbbing in the depths of Bufang's soul told him that the real test to become the god of cooking was about to begin. In the chaotic universe, the void was torn apart. A wisp of black gas that looked like a little snake emerged. Then, it transformed into an ethereal and weak figure. If Bufang were here, he would definitely recognize that the aura of this little snake was that of Soul 13's clone. Damn, chef. Do you really think you've killed me, Soul 13? I bet you never thought that I still have a clone. The little black snake turned into Soul 13's figure, hissing bitterly. After losing his true form, he did not know how long it would take for him to become a soul overlord again with this clone. However, with his previous experience, he believed that he could become a soul overlord again. Buzz, Soul 13 turned, trying to hide and grow wretchedly. Suddenly, a chuckle rang out. I've finally found you. A ripping sound rang out. The void was torn apart. A hand fell and grabbed the little snake that was Soul 13's clone. Soul 13 froze. In front of him, a figure whose head was shrouded in a hazy mist emerged. You've made me look for you. You can't run away this time, can you? Chapter 1588. The gluttony soul overlord had fallen. All the beautiful fantasies the soul demons had dreamed of had disappeared like bubbles. Humans fought back in desperation, clenching the weapons in their hands, shouting and roaring as they chased after the soul demons with hatred. This was a war against a common enemy. They had finally seized the initiative in the war, so they had to fight back and kill the soul demons in one fell swoop. They would not give them any chance to fight back. Bufang returned from the ruined planet and landed on the Luo family's skyscraper. The morning sun rose from the horizon, casting a dazzling light on Bufang. The people who stayed behind in the Xiai divine dynasty were looking at him with respect and fanaticism. Even though he was just a chef, he was a chef who had saved the world. He was a chef who deserved everyone's respect. At some point, Yu was standing quietly behind Bufang. This battle had completely spread Bufang's name. Perhaps from now on, no one in this chaotic universe would not know the name of Bufang. He was a chef who was comparable to a heaven god. It's finally over. Bufang opened his mouth and yawned. A sense of exhaustion swept over him. This time, he was indeed exhausted. Whether it was the urgent breakthrough or the promotion test, he had been in a state of tension. It was not until this moment that he finally relaxed. The entire skyscraper was swaying precariously as if it would collapse at any moment. However, with the system around, this building should not collapse. After all, the restaurant was still on it. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang stepped into the restaurant. He pulled out a chair and sat down. He needed a good rest to calm his emotions. The catastrophe of the soul demons, which had swept across the entire chaotic universe, had indeed woken many people up. Although the catastrophe was over, there were still many questions that Bufang needed to think about. Of course, after the catastrophe, Bufang's strength had also stepped into another level. If he wanted to break through to the heaven god realm, he needed more turnover. Therefore, it was necessary for the restaurant to be open. Apart from that, Bufang also needed to find a way to awaken the artifact spirits of the god of cooking set. In other words, he had to enter the place where the artifact spirits were sleeping. That place was very mysterious. At least until now, Bufang had not figured it out. Was it in some corner of the Chaosverse? Or was it in some great world? Since it was the sleeping place of the god of cooking set's artifact spirit, it should not be some remote place. After all, an artifact spirit also wanted face. The Lord Go's true identity was actually a heavenly god, the heavenly god of time. This was something that Bufang had not expected. However, the current Lord Go had not yet recovered to his peak. He did not even have a tenth of his heavenly god's strength. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so difficult to deal with Soul 13. Even Soul 13 was attacking the Chaosverse with such reckless abandon. If not for Bufang's breakthrough and the Qilin's possession, the final outcome was really hard to predict. Here comes the problem. Where did all the heavenly gods go? Heavenly god time was the Lord Go, so it was understandable that he had not yet recovered to his peak. Could it be that the other heavenly gods had been reincarnated for some reason, just like the Lord Go? In that case, which heavenly god was the one who attacked him during his heaven god tribulation? Bufang narrowed his eyes. His mind was spinning. He was thinking about the problem. Bufang knew very well that there were still heavenly gods in the Chaosverse who had not fallen into the reincarnation cycle like the Lord Go. But why did the heavenly god not attack him during the calamity of the soul demons? Instead, he slapped him when he used the divine flame to devour the law? Did he bully the weak and fear the strong? Did he think that Bufang was a pushover? Bufang stroked his chin. With a thought in his mind, he brought the Lord Go out of the heaven and earth farmland. Oh! Bufang paused for a moment because he brought out a familiar little figure. Xiaopi! The mantis shrimp rolled its eyes. Lying on the Lord Go's head, he seemed to be giggling. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. Ever since this little fellow went into the heaven and earth farmland, there had been no news of him. He did not expect that he would come out now. Xiaopi landed on Bufang's shoulder, his numerous legs crawling around. The Lord Go lay under the path understanding tree, sleeping soundly. The previous battle might have consumed all the energy he had accumulated. Bufang, I'm hungry. You sat not far from Bufang, looking at him eagerly. Bufang paused. He nodded, rose to his feet, and was about to step into the kitchen. Bufang, young man, I am hungry too. Hades' era followed Yu's example, looking eagerly at Bufang. Give I a spicy strip, and I will be satisfied. When Bufang turned his head, Hades' era said hurriedly. Looking at Hades' era with an expressionless face, Bufang's mouth rose coldly, as if he was sneering. That sneer made Nether King Er Ha's whole body shiver. Now, Bufang young man's wings had hardened, and he even dared to sneer at him. Bufang went into the kitchen, washing the vegetables and the utensils. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. He liked this kind of atmosphere and style. He took out the dragon blood rice and began to cook it. However, after cooking the dragon blood rice, Bufang was not in a hurry to take it out. Instead, he took out the Soul Overlord meat. It was a piece of meat cut from the Gluttony Soul Overlord's thigh. The shell of the meat was very hard. With the dragon bone kitchen knife, Bufang carefully separated the shell from the meat. Thud! A soft piece of meat was thrown on the chopping board. The texture and lines on the meat were very neat and clear. Bufang reached out his hand, pressed it, and felt the clear rebound of the meat. Bufang's curiosity was aroused. He twirled the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, creating a knife light. Holding the knife, Bufang stuck out 3 fingers of his other hand and placed them on the meat. The dragon bone kitchen knife cut it horizontally, cutting the meat into hundreds of layers. Every single layer was a thin piece. This was a test of his knife skills, but with Bufang's current knife skills, it was very natural for him to do all this, even though it was Soul Overlord meat. After cutting it, Bufang thought for a while, as if thinking about how to cook it. Originally, Bufang planned to throw it into the wok and fry it. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was not appropriate. Suddenly Bufang's eyes lit up. He took the black turtle constellation wok. Without heating it, he directly put the Gluttony Soul Overlord meat into the wok. He held out his index finger. Buzz, a silver divine flame suddenly sprang out of Bufang's hand. The silver divine flame kept jumping. However, this was not what Bufang wanted. His divine sense surged, controlling the divine flame. Whoosh! The next moment, the divine flame's flow changed, and it spewed out of Bufang's finger at an extremely fast speed. He controlled the temperature. He aimed the divine flame at the piece of meat in the black turtle constellation wok. As it approached, the flame spewed out, and the meat began to change color at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soul Overlord meat was a bit like cuttlefish meat, which solidified when heated. Bufang's control of the divine flame was somewhat similar to that of a flamethrower. Heating it at a fixed point made the flavor of the ingredients unique and concentrated. The black turtle constellation wok began to spin under Bufang's palm. The flamethrower aimed at the Soul Overlord meat. As the black turtle constellation wok spun, every position was considered. Layers of Soul Overlord meat began to solidify. An aroma wafted out. Bufang's face was filled with shock as he sniffed the aroma. It smelled so good. This Soul Overlord meat was simply a top-grade ingredient. Just smelling it made the energy in one's body boil. Bufang was somewhat intoxicated and even a little impatient, but he needed to calm his mind. After the fire was done, the Soul Overlord meat in the black turtle constellation wok had completely changed. It was roasted until it was golden and glistening with oil. The aroma rose. Bufang took out the meat and placed it on a blue and white porcelain plate. Bufang began to make the sauce. After the black turtle constellation wok was heated, he poured oil into it. The oil sizzled and splashed in the wok. He shook the wok so that the oil was evenly distributed in the wok. Then, Bufang poured all the prepared ingredients into the wok, stir-fried them, and added the secret abyssal chili sauce and some essence seasoning. He concocted a dark brown sauce. The sauce was thick and silky. Swish. He took a small bowl and poured the sauce into it. Bufang dipped his chopsticks in a little bit of the sauce and put it in his mouth. It tasted sour and spicy. The sour and spicy taste burst out on the tip of his tongue and spread across his tongue as if it wanted to rush into his scalp. It made his scalp go numb. He stacked the small bowl on the blue and white porcelain plate with the Soul Overlord meat. The dish was ready. Bufang walked out of the kitchen with the dragon blood rice and the roasted Soul Overlord meat. Everyone in the restaurant could not wait any longer. The aroma of the roasted soul overlord meat made everyone sink into it, unable to extricate themselves. The aroma seemed to be able to steal people's souls. Bufang did not expect that soul overlord meat would be so fragrant. Especially when roasted by his own fire, the perfect heat made the soul overlord meat turn golden. The 100-layer soul overlord meat was stacked layer by layer, with the oil sliding down the middle. It was a beautiful sight. When the dish was served, Hades' era was stunned. He could not wait to grab the chopsticks and have a taste. However, you knocked it open with her chopsticks. You glanced indifferently at Hades' era, and the latter shuddered. How did Nethery become so scary? Have her wings hardened like Bufang's? Youngsters nowadays. Bufang handed the dragon blood rice to you. He grabbed the chopsticks, picked up a piece of soul overlord meat, dipped it in the sour and spicy sauce, and stuffed it into his mouth. The flavor of the sauce burst out instantly, followed by the taste of the meat. It was rich and chewy. As he chewed, he felt the elasticity of the meat knocking on the wall of his mouth. Bufang narrowed his eyes, immersed in the double impact of the meat and sauce. His guess was right. The soul overlord ingredient was indeed a top ingredient. After all, how bad could the quality of the meat be if it could become a soul overlord? Each piece of meat was cut very thin by Bufang, and when he picked it up, it seemed to reflect the light in the lamplight. Everyone ate happily. Having a delicious meal after a great battle made them feel as happy as immortals. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Bufang packed up his things. He walked out of the restaurant, leaned against the railing on the top of the building, and looked at the whole Xiai divine dynasty. Everyone was immersed in the joy of victory. It was a kind of joy that came from persisting in a battle of life and death. This joy seemed to have infected Bufang. He exhaled and looked at the world. Suddenly, Bufang's heart skipped a beat. He had broken through to the god realm, and this time, he did not get any more fragments of the god of cooking set. This meant that he had indeed collected all the god of cooking set. However, there was an extra reward: the right to teleport to the sleeping place of the artifact spirit. This meant that if Bufang wanted to completely collect all the god of cooking sets, he still had to work hard. System, where is the sleeping place of the artifact spirit? Can you tell me? Bufang asked the system, enjoying the comfortable morning breeze. The system was silent for a while. Then, it answered seriously, I can't tell you where the sleeping place of the artifact spirit is, but I can remind you that teleporting there is a risk. A risk? It seems that place is not safe. Then where is it? Don't tell me it's going to the soul demon universe? Or is it the lair of the heaven god who slapped me? With that in mind, he asked the system. After a long time, guess, the system replied. Bufang was speechless. He could not believe that the system had become naughty. Chapter 1589. If truth be told, Bufang's curiosity was aroused by the system. Where was the sleeping place of the artifact spirit? The almighty Qilin said it was a place he was familiar with, and the system was naughty enough not to tell him. Where could it be? A place where the artifact spirit could sleep was definitely extraordinary. Bufang pondered for a long time, his heart filled with curiosity. However, Bufang did not think too much about it. Standing on the top floor of the skyscraper, he felt the morning breeze. A new day had begun. It was a day full of vigor and vitality. However, looking at the ruins of the city, Bufang did not open for business today. Both the Xiai Crown Prince and the Titan Crown Prince had joined the army to hunt down the soul demons, and neither of them returned to the restaurant. After the great battle, Bufang was a little tired, so he decided to give himself a vacation. Therefore, he chose not to open for business today. Of course, he did not have anything else to do, and he did not have anything else to do. He planned to pull up a chair and lie on the top floor of the skyscraper for a whole day. In the sky, one after another, the figures of experts descended from the sky. They were experts from various great worlds. They had formed teams to hunt down the soul demons, won, and returned triumphantly. It was a lively day. The whole Xiai divine dynasty seemed to have been reborn. People were laughing and cheering, thinking that it was a day of celebration. Bufang lay lazily on the chair for half a day. When he opened his eyes, it was already late at night. The day had passed just like that. In fact, sometimes he felt quite comfortable when he was idle. With a thought, Bufang entered the heaven and earth farmland. He had not been here for a long time. This time, he found that it seemed to have undergone earth-shattering changes. The surface area became incomparably vast, like a small planet. The layout of the lush grassland and the rushing river was no different from before. However, it was countless times larger than before. In a corner of the farmland stood a wooden hut. Bufang landed on the ground. Many people walked out of the wooden hut. 80 had become much fatter. The mutation of the heaven and earth farmland had brought 80 many benefits. This chicken had eaten until it was as big as a pig. He flapped his wings, but he couldn't even run. Bufang was speechless at the gluttonous chicken. Nyo Hansan rubbed his hands and looked at Bufang. He naturally knew about the changes in the heaven and earth farmland. The changes here were closely related to Bufang. The heaven and earth farmland would only change when Bufang became stronger. This meant that Bufang's strength had become stronger again. This fellow was simply a monster. Voila! In the river of life, the fat blood lobster waved its pincer and waved it at Bufang. However, after Bufang gave it a look, the blood lobster shrank back into the river. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. The heaven tree was located in the center of the farmland, towering straight into the clouds. On the heaven tree, a senseless lotus was quietly blooming. Mu Hongzhi had said that this senseless lotus could save his life at a critical moment, so Bufang had always been curious about it. He was very curious about the function of the senseless lotus. The 9-revolution Great Path tea tree was exuding vitality. The aroma of tea leaves wafted in the air, as if there were camellias blooming on it. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang walked in the farmland. He could feel the quiet changes that were taking place here. The concentration of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here was even higher than in the netherworld. It must be excellent to cultivate here. He chatted with Nyo Hansan for a while. Then, Bufang left the farmland. Sitting in a wooden chair, Nyo Hansan crossed his legs and watched Bufang leave. There seemed to be a faint light flashing in his eyes. Bufang returned to the restaurant. It was getting late. The army that had been chasing after the soul demons had returned. Without a doubt, they had won a great victory. Without the guidance of the soul overlords, the soul demons were all killed by the Xiai Divine Emperor. This time, the people of the Xiai Divine Dynasty showed no mercy. This kind of creature had nearly destroyed the entire chaotic universe. They didn't dare to let such a terrifying situation continue to happen. Therefore, they would not let any soul demon go. All the numbered soul demons were killed. The few remaining numbered soul demons were captured and imprisoned in the abyssal dungeon forever. The soul demon ancient beasts, on the other hand, were captured. They were huge and could not be captured by ordinary means, so the Xiai Divine Emperor had arranged for them to be sealed in some planets. Bufang stood at the top of the skyscraper. One figure after another sped toward him. The Titan Crown Prince, his body rumbling with energy and blood, landed in front of Bufang with bloodshot eyes. He bowed respectfully to Bufang. The Xiai Crown Prince, the Xiai Divine Emperor, and the heads of the various aristocratic families also landed. Everyone looked at Bufang in awe. The Xiai Divine Emperor had a complicated look in his eyes. He did not expect that Bufang would eventually become the existence who saved them from disaster. He had saved the Xiai Divine Dynasty. He had saved the Xiai Divine Dynasty from being destroyed like the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty and the Titan Divine Dynasty. This was a kind of happiness. In the following days, the Xiai divine dynasty did not stop hunting down the soul demons, not sparing a single one. They began to search the small worlds one by one. As long as they found any signs of soul demons, they would kill them by force. The Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty and the Titan Divine Dynasty had also regained their status as divine dynasties. Although their divine emperors had fallen, their status still existed. Of course, compared to the Xiai Divine Dynasty, their vitality was greatly damaged. The Titan Crown Prince returned to the Titan Divine Dynasty. He rebuilt the Divine Dynasty and began to cultivate talents from the remaining small worlds. The Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, on the other hand, was managed by Xiao Yinyu, and Amo Xiao Yinyu had broken through the Heaven Illuminator realm, and her current strength was extraordinary. At least, ordinary high-grade god kings might not be her match. As the new empress of the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, she had won the hearts of the masses. The whole chaotic universe began to resume its previous operation, and it was thriving. In the Xiai Divine Dynasty, in the Luo family's skyscraper, the top floor. No. Not only the top floor, but from the top floor all the way to the bottom floor of the renovated skyscraper, there were long lines. Everyone was crowding around. The restaurant was bustling with activity. Luo Sanyang walked through the crowd, stepped onto the top floor, and followed the line into the restaurant. Inside, the restaurant was bustling with activity. Every diner's face was red from eating, and their lips were red and swollen, but their eyes were shining. There was a strange smell in the air. It was a little stinky and sour. In short, it was not a pleasant smell. Luo Sanyang's eyes widened because she found that the stench was coming from the bowls in the hands of the diners in the restaurant. Damn it! It smells King good. It's so spicy and sour. It's so delicious that I almost swallowed my tongue. It's so delicious. This soup is so fresh, but it doesn't lack the sour taste. It's simply a delicacy in the world. The diners were full of praise. They ate crazily and took a deep breath, feeling so happy that bubbles were rising from their mouth. They were holding the snail rice noodles cooked by Bufang. Each of them had a bowl of it, and they were as happy as immortals. The people waiting in line outside, on the other hand, were so greedy that their mouths were almost watering. Only those who had tasted the snail rice noodles knew how delicious it was. It was an ecstatic delicacy. Ting-a-ling. The curtain of the kitchen door was lifted. Bufang walked out with 2 big bowls of snail rice noodles in his hand. The Xiai Crown Prince took the bowls with familiarity and walked toward the dining table. Everything looked so orderly. You are also helping. As for Hades' Era, he was sitting in front of the table, chatting with Luo Sanyang's girlfriends. When they saw Luo Sanyang looking around, they waved happily. Bufang went into the kitchen. He shook off the water stains on his hands. Xiaopi, on the other hand, was lying on his shoulder, rolling her little eyes. Bufang took out the ingredients and began to cook again. Every day's business was actually repeating the complicated cooking work. However, it was this tedious, repetitive, and complicated work that made Bufang's cooking skills improve little by little. Bufang did not know what happened after the calamity of the soul demons. During this time, Bufang rarely had the time to calm down and cook. Every day, he cooked and opened the restaurant. When he was done, he cooked some delicious dishes for everyone to taste. Occasionally, the Xiai Divine Emperor would come to the restaurant to eat and drink, but Bufang did not mind. The days went by unhurriedly. The capital of the Xiai Divine Dynasty had also regained its prosperity. In the sky, the stars were moving, the sky was flashing, and the rivers of stars were flowing backward. Bufang stood on the top of a skyscraper, looking up at the sky and relaxing his body and mind. Now, Bufang's cultivation base had reached the God-Emperor realm. He was an existence that stood at the peak of this chaotic universe. However, because of this, Bufang had also fallen into a bottleneck. He wanted to become the god of cooking, and this was certainly not the end. Bufang still needed to move forward. Therefore, he had to break through the God-Emperor realm and reach a higher realm. However, how to break through was a big problem for Bufang. He had broken through to the God realm by force and became a heaven illuminator. The normal way of breaking through to the heaven God realm naturally did not work for him. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. In addition, it was almost time to prepare for the awakening of the artifact spirits of the God of Cooking set. The location of the sleeping place of the artifact spirits, which had piqued Bufang's curiosity, was almost about to be revealed. Buzz, sure enough, while Bufang was deep in thought, the system's serious voice rang out in his head. "Attention, host. Do you want to use the qualification to go to the sleeping place of the artifact spirits?" the system asked. Bufang stared at the starry sky with a deep look in his eyes. At last, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Yes." He had to face what he had to face. If the God of Cooking sets were incomplete, it would be very difficult for him to set foot on the true peak of the God of Cooking. Therefore, he had to wake up the artifact spirit. After Bufang agreed, the system fell silent. No one knew how long it would take. The system's voice rang out again. Qualification confirmation completed. Attention, host. The teleportation to the sleeping place of the artifact spirits will begin in 6 hours. A friendly reminder, the sleeping place of the artifact spirits is very dangerous. Host, please be prepared. Oh? The teleportation will begin in 6 hours? So urgent. Bufang was slightly taken aback. However, 6 hours was enough for him to prepare things. In fact, he did not have anything to prepare. The sleeping place of the artifact spirits was very dangerous, so Bufang planned to go there himself. However, as soon as he turned around, Yu was standing behind him. The look in her eyes made Bufang's scalp go numb. There was no doubt that Yu knew where Bufang was going to teleport to, so she chose to follow him. Bufang could not refuse such a situation. Back in the restaurant, Bufang briefly explained the situation to the Shy Crown Prince and the Titan Crown Prince. After arranging the business, he began to prepare for the teleportation. The Lord Go continued to lie under the Path Understanding tree, sleeping soundly. Now, no one dared to disrespect the Lord Go, including the Shy Divine Emperor. After all, the Lord Go's true identity was that of a heaven god. How could they dare to offend him? Everything was ready. Bufang came to the top floor of the skyscraper in front of the restaurant. This time, the teleportation array was set up here. Clad in the vermilion robe, Bufang had Xiaopi and Little Hu on his back. Yu stood quietly beside him, waiting for the teleportation. Many people learned that Bufang was going on a long journey. They all came to see him off. Even the Xiai Divine Emperor came from thousands of miles away. In the end, the whole divine dynasty was shaken. The Luo family's skyscraper was surrounded by crowds of people. This showed Bufang's popularity. Looking at the many people of the divine dynasty, Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. The system's cold and serious voice rang in his ears. Around his body, white spots of light appeared little by little, and finally turned into a mysterious array. This formation was many times more profound than the previous teleportation formation. Just a glance at it would make one feel as if their mind would sink into it. Buzz, as soon as the array appeared, it rotated slowly. Then, under the watchful eyes of tens of thousands, Bufang, Little Hu, Yu, Xiaopi's body, slowly, they turned into specks of white light and quietly faded away. Bufang was in a trance. He felt that the people in front of him were getting more and more blurry, and even Yu, who was standing beside him, had become blurred. In the end, all that was left was endless darkness. No one knew how long it lasted. In that endless darkness, a ray of light appeared. Then, at the end of the darkness, a star appeared. It was a blue star. Chapter 1590. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. At the top of the Luo family's skyscraper, Baiguang's figure was dazzling. Like a shooting star, he shot into the sky and disappeared. All that was left was the empty ground. Everyone looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. Bufang had left. He left just like that. No one knew how long Bufang would be gone. In the restaurant, Lord Go, who was lying on his stomach, slowly opened his eyes. There seemed to be chaos swirling in his eyes. After his last outburst, Lord Go's fat seemed to have evaporated a little. He stood up under the path understanding tree, opened his mouth, and yawned. Then, he strode out with his enchanting cat-like step. "Hey, Lord Go, where are you going?" Hades Era, who was sitting in the restaurant, was bewildered. Lord Go gave Hades Era a sideways glance, then twitched his mouth. "I'm going to the place where I should go. There are some things that I need to get back," Lord Go said. Then, his figure turned into a black shadow, rushing into the sky, creating a vortex in the void. It was as if he had entered the chaos and lost contact. Hades Era was a little bewildered. Bufang had left. Lord Go had also left, leaving him alone here. Bufang widened his eyes, looking at the blue planet in front of him. A familiar feeling washed over him, and Bufang's heartbeat involuntarily quickened. It was a strange feeling. A blue planet. Could it be it was getting closer and closer? That blue planet kept enlarging in Bufang's eyes. Soon, it went into the clouds. The clouds fell, and it was blurry. Continuing downwards, through the layers of clouds, was a vast expanse of land and sea. Earth, China. Bufang opened his eyes. What he saw was a ceiling painted with white mud. As Bufang stood up, the bed beneath him creaked continuously as if it was going to collapse at any moment. Where was this? Bufang raised his head and looked around. It was a simple room. There were not many furnishings in the room, and it looked rather shabby. The air was filled with a rotten smell. This smell made Bufang, who was used to smelling top-grade ingredients, frown. It was the sour smell of rotting ingredient. Looking over, the ground was messily piled with tattered vegetable leaves and chopped vegetables. From the cut on the vegetables, it could be seen that the person who cut the vegetables did not have good knife skills. Bufang didn't move. He frowned and fell into deep thought. During the teleportation, he saw a blue planet. That should be his destination. He should be on that blue planet right now. That familiar feeling. Could that blue planet be Earth? Bufang narrowed his eyes, feeling that it was somewhat impossible. How could Earth be related to the god of cooking sets? However, it was not impossible. Bufang narrowed his eyes again. It was the system that brought him to the hidden dragon continent, and the system was so closely related to the god of cooking set. This meant that there were definitely secrets hidden on Earth. Or was Earth the birthplace of the god of cooking? Without thinking too much, what Bufang needed to do now was to get a better understanding of the environment he was in. Buzz, his divine sense surged. Bufang suddenly froze. He found that the range of his divine sense could only extend to a radius of 10 meters. How was this possible? As a god-emperor, once Bufang's divine sense was fully extended, it could even cover the whole Xiai divine dynasty. How could his mighty divine sense be suppressed to such an extent? Yes, it was suppressed. Bufang's cultivation base did not disappear. Instead, it was suppressed by a supreme force. It was as if a towering mountain was pressing down on his body, making him unable to move. The divine power in him seemed to be frozen. Although it could flow, it could not exert much power. Buzz Bufang's eyes lit up. He activated the divine power, the god of cooking's eye. His eyes shone brilliantly as if he could see through the sky. When he looked up, he seemed to see a huge vortex over his head. Oh? Interesting. Earth's Great Path? If it's the Great Path, it can't suppress me. Who is it? Bufang dispersed the god of cooking's eye. With his cultivation base suppressed, using the god of cooking's eye now placed a great burden on Bufang's divine sense. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they come. The system had said that the sleeping place of the artifact's spirit was very dangerous, so he had to be more careful on this trip. Bufang got up from the bed. On the floor were his flip-flop. If nothing unexpected happened, Bufang was now back in his little shabby house before he transmigrated. At that time, he was still an apprentice chef in a restaurant. His face was expressionless as he held the flip-flops. With a thought, Bufang tried to summon the god of cooking set. However, with a thought, he found that the god of cooking sets on his body still hadn't appeared. The god of cooking sets were floating in his spirit sea. What was going on? Even the god of cooking sets were suppressed? Then his idea of relying on the god of cooking sets to sense the artifact spirit wouldn't work. Bufang furrowed his brows. All of a sudden, Bufang was startled. Where are you, Xiaopi and Little Hu? Where did they go? Without a doubt they should also be on Earth. But where did they go? Bufang hurriedly opened his wardrobe, took out a white shirt, and wrapped it around his body. Then, he opened the door and hurried out. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a golden mantis shrimp curled up in front of the door. Xiaopi raised his head, looking at Bufang. With a sizzling sound, he turned into a golden light and landed on his shoulder. When Bufang saw Little Hu, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he patted Little Hu on the head. Where are you and Little Hu? Bufang asked. Xiaopi rolled his eyes and shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Bufang frowned and took a deep breath. A look of worry flashed across his face. He wasn't worried about the safety of you and Little Hu. Even though their cultivation bases were suppressed, no one on Earth could hurt you. You were a cursed goddess with a heaven god-level body. Even if a nuclear bomb bombed you, you would be unscathed. Even if you were suppressed, your physical resistance was still there. You couldn't use your earth-shattering cultivation base, but you still had some ordinary fighting prowess. In Bufang's opinion, ordinary fighting prowess would be at the level of a peerless expert on Earth. Bufang was worried about the crisis on Earth that the system had mentioned. If you and Little Hu accidentally got involved, it would be terrible. He walked out of the room and down the old building. Opposite the old building was the restaurant where Bufang had worked as an intern. At the entrance of the restaurant, a young man in a dirty chef's robe saw Bufang, and his eyes lit up instantly. Boy, hurry up and come here. What time is it? I called you, but you didn't answer. Are you going to be fired? You don't want to work anymore, do you? The young man had a cigarette in his mouth. When he saw Bufang, he scolded him loudly. The young man's name was Lu Mu. He had been an apprentice chef in the restaurant a little earlier than Bufang, so he called himself Bufang's senior brother. He liked to order Bufang, who was dull and only knew how to cook. Bufang glanced at Lu Mu expressionlessly, then reached into his pocket and took out a cell phone. It was an old Nokia cell phone. In the era of smartphones, it was considered an antique. Look, I called you a few times. Now that you've grown up, you've learned to be lazy. Lu Mu sneered. He held the cigarette between his index and middle fingers, then puffed out a smoke ring. Bufang glanced at Lu Mu, then grabbed the cell phone and pressed the button. Crack! Bufang didn't even use his strength. The phone was directly crushed, and electric arcs crackled a few times. Lu Mu was speechless. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. I just came back, so I'm still jet-lagged. Bufang said calmly, then casually threw the broken cell phone aside. I have something to do, so I have to go out. Bufang said calmly. Then, he turned around and walked away. Lu Mu's cigarette fell to the ground. When he came back to his senses, his embarrassment turned into anger. This stinky brat actually learned to bluff. Does he think he can show off by crushing a broken cell phone? Stop right there. Did I say you could leave? Lu Mu strode forward and caught up with him. He reached out his hand and patted on Bufang's shoulder, trying to pull Bufang away. He believed that Bufang was bluffing. He, Lu Mu, bullied Bufang every day, so how could he not know this brat's character? King, turn around. Lu Mu roared. However, he didn't manage to move Bufang even a little. It was as if he was pulling Bufang onto a boulder. Bufang stopped and glanced at Lu Mu. Lu Mu originally wanted to say something threatening, but when he met Bufang's eyes, his words got stuck in his throat. Bufang's eyes were like a bottomless abyss, making his scalp go numb. Damn! He's a different person, isn't he? That look is too scary. Lu Mu knelt on the spot. He felt his legs go weak, and with a thud, he knelt in front of Bufang. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. I'm sorry. I haven't adjusted to the time difference yet, so I startled you. The aura that Bufang had unintentionally released seemed to have frightened Lu Mu. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Xiaopi, who was on Bufang's shoulder, blinked and squeaked at Lu Mu. Lu Mu's lips trembled, and his body, which had gone limp on the ground, trembled. That's King mantis shrimp? In this world, there was a golden mantis shrimp? Help me apply for leave. Bufang didn't want to waste time talking to Lu Mu. He patted the other's hand. Crack, Lu Mu's eyes widened, and he let out a miserable howl. Bufang patted his hand. Lu Mu felt as if his hand was caught in a door. Lu Mu trembled all over, looking in horror at Bufang, who was walking away in his flip-flops and shirt. This Bufang was not the Bufang he knew. This guy is a ghost. Recently, the TV news has been reporting that there are more people with extraordinary abilities, and that there are more and more paranormal incidents. Is it all true? Bufang is not possessed by a ghost, is he? Lu Mu was so frightened that he could not stop trembling. Bufang left. He planned to look around for you and Little Hu. Although he had returned to Earth, he had no time to reminisce about everything. The most important thing now was to find the sleeping spirit of the god of cooking set. The most important thing now was to find you. He wasn't afraid that others would cause trouble for you, but he was afraid that you would cause trouble. If that happened, it would shock the whole world. However, because Bufang's divine sense was suppressed, he couldn't spread it out to search. After searching for a long time, he found nothing. Swish, walking on the street, it suddenly rained. Drip, drip, drip. Bean-sized raindrops fell on him, slightly surprising Bufang. Because it was raining, pedestrians hurried away to avoid the heavy rain. Bufang, on the other hand, stood alone in the rain. Xiaopi jumped happily on Bufang's shoulder, moving its dense legs. It seemed to be very happy with the rain. Bufang reached out his hand, and a drop of rain fell from his palm with a splat. Looking at the raindrop, Bufang raised his eyebrows slightly. Because within the raindrops, there was spirit qi spreading out. It was a spiritual energy rain. Bufang was stunned. Spiritual energy rain? Was this still Earth? Chapter 1591. It was raining. And it was raining with spiritual energy. Although Bufang's divine sense was suppressed, it still existed. He could clearly sense the spiritual energy in the rain. Would there be spiritual energy on Earth? Did it exist all the time, or did it appear because of his return? Bufang was a little confused. He didn't cultivate before, so he didn't know if there was spiritual energy in the rain. The spiritual energy rain didn't last long and soon stopped. The ground was full of water. When Bufang stepped on it, the water splashed, and the cold rain went through his toes, making him feel cold. Spiritual energy was only contained in the rain. After the falling rain evaporated, the spiritual energy contained in the rain also rose. It filled the air. In fact, there was no spiritual energy in the air. It was because of the rain that there was spiritual energy. What was strange was the rain. Suddenly, Bufang was stunned. He was lost in thought. It seemed that the artifact spirit was really sleeping on Earth. Otherwise, there wouldn't be spiritual energy rain on Earth. Bufang was a little helpless because he couldn't find you. His divine sense was suppressed, and the suppression was very strong. Of course, Bufang could force his way through the suppression, but he didn't know what would happen if he did. Would he alert the enemy? Or would it cause a drastic change on Earth, destroying it or something? Back in the old house, the air was still filled with the smell of moldy ingredients. Bufang frowned and collected all the ingredients, throwing them away like garbage. He didn't like this kind of ingredients at all. There was a knock on the door. Bufang opened the door. Outside the door stood Lu Mu, who was looking at Bufang in horror, as if he had seen a ghost. He didn't dare to offend Bufang at all. He crushed his phone and patted it, almost breaking his fingers. There was something wrong with this guy. The head chef wants you to go over, Lu Mu said. After that, he hurriedly ran away. He hadn't figured out how to face Bufang, so he didn't want to see Bufang now. Head chef? Patting Xiaopi on his back, Bufang stepped out of the room. He walked downstairs to the restaurant across the street. Yumanor was the name of this restaurant. The decorations were magnificent and magnificent. However, business was quite bleak. This had nothing to do with the chef's skills. The dishes in this restaurant actually tasted pretty good. Bufang was a chef's apprentice here, so he had tasted the chef's cooking before. However, the restaurant just wasn't popular. Back then, Bufang couldn't understand why. Lu Mu cowered to the side in fear. Bufang stepped into the restaurant and glanced at him. Lu Mu cowered, not daring to look Bufang in the eye. Bufang pursed his lips, clasped his hands behind his back, and walked toward the kitchen. Needless to say, the head chef should be in the kitchen. Chi. As soon as he entered the kitchen, there was the sound of pots being tossed. That was the sound of pots colliding with the stove, and the fire was raging. Bufang raised his head and looked over. There, a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s was holding a ladle in one hand and the edge of the iron pot with a rag in the other. He was tossing the wok skillfully. Of course, in Bufang's eyes, the middle-aged man's wok-tossing technique was full of mistakes. At the edge of the stove, there were a lot of seasonings: sugar, salt, MSG, soy sauce, garlic paste, chili. To Bufang, all of this was familiar and strange at the same time. It seemed that Bufang hadn't done this kind of simple cooking for a long time. Chi, the wok tossing ended. A spoonful of water sizzled. Then, he covered the wok and stewed it. At this time, the head chef finally had time to look at Bufang. "You're here?" The head chef looked at Bufang and smiled gently. Bufang nodded expressionlessly. His face had become much gentler. This head chef had taught him everything and had high hopes for Bufang. So, Bufang was much gentler to him. "Bufang, you've been slacking these days. Being a chef is a profession that you can't slack off. Once you slack off, your sensitivity to food will weaken, and it will be difficult for you to cook satisfactory dishes," the head chef said. He wiped his hands with a rag, leaned against the stove, and looked at Bufang. Bufang nodded. Of course, he knew what the other party meant by slacking off. However, it was not his fault. After all, he had transmigrated. "Our Yu family's business is not very good. We might not be able to continue. Alas, what a pity. I was ambitious to come to Yu family to make a name for myself, but in the end I ended up like this. Alright, let's stop talking. Go and cut the ingredients. We'll have dinner later." The head chef sighed. He turned around, uncovered the wok, and continued to cook. Bufang was stunned, but he did not refuse. He walked to another stove. He picked up a few potatoes on the stove and tossed them in the air. They were familiar ingredients. Cutting potatoes was a very troublesome thing because he had to peel them first before he could shred them, but Bufang did not care. He suddenly had an urge to cook a dish. He wondered if he still had that kind of control over his cooking skills after he came back. He grabbed a kitchen knife from the knife rack. With a shake of his hand, he twirled the knife in his hand. The knife light flashed. The potatoes were washed and cleaned. Then, he tossed them up gently. The potatoes floated in the air. When they were about to fall, Bufang's eyes suddenly became sharp. In his eyes, the falling speed of the potatoes became very slow. Buzz, the kitchen knife slashed out fiercely. As if he had carved a circle, the knife light splashed everywhere. Then, he held the kitchen knife horizontally, with the blade facing up. The potato immediately fell and landed on the surface of the knife. It was still spinning in the air. On the other side, there was a whole potato skin of the same width. Lumu happened to come in. When he saw this scene, his mouth dropped open, his face dumbfounded. This kind of operation was so dazzling that it almost blinded his eyes. Who could peel a potato like this? You, Lumu stretched out his fingers, stammering, unable to say a word. Bufang glanced at him, the corners of his mouth twitching. Clatter, 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 there was a fast-paced collision. It was the collision of the kitchen knife and the chopping board, which was very pleasant to the ear. The entire oval-shaped potato was cut into thin shreds, and every shred of potato had the same thickness. This sound made the head chef turn around, and he happened to see Bufang's knife skill. That moment was a little breathtaking. Of course, it was just breathtaking. If he had seen the scene when Bufang tossed the potatoes and peeled them, he would have been as shocked as Lumu. After cutting the potatoes, Bufang did not continue. The next dish was stir-fried potato shreds. Continue, the head chef said all of a sudden. He didn't know why, but when Bufang used his knife skill, he had a kind of charm that made him admire him. Did this kid suddenly become enlightened? Okay. Bufang nodded, his face expressionless. He lit the fire and heated the wok. The sound of the burning gas arose. Bufang's movements were simple and elegant. The main thing was that this dish was so simple that it didn't have any difficulty. He swung the kitchen knife across the chopping board, and the sliced potatoes fell into the wok. Instantly, thick white smoke rose. Holding the ladle, Bufang began to shake the wok. That set of movements was so coordinated, as if they were connected in a line. The fire was burning, but Bufang's face was expressionless. Without looking, Bufang grabbed the ladle, scooping the seasoning on the stove. Bufang didn't need to look at how much he should scoop and how much was appropriate. He sprinkled it into the wok, shaking it. Lumu swallowed his saliva. This kid, is he messing around? Is he trying to be cool? He didn't even look at the amount of seasoning, and just sprinkled it into the wok. Lumu didn't believe that Bufang's cooking skill could be so good all of a sudden. It was obvious that they were on the same level before. They had agreed to become dogs together. Why did he quietly show off? Shut up. Watch carefully. The head chef scolded Lumu excitedly. He turned his head, staring at Bufang's cooking. There was no mistake. It was so perfect that he couldn't believe it. The calmness in his eyes showed his confidence in his cooking skill. Bufang believed that the amount of seasoning and the control of the heat, only a world-class chef could have such confidence. Textbook cooking. Sizzle. The wok shook. The shredded potatoes in the wok fell into the ladle. With a swish, they were poured into the bowl. The soup poured down. There seemed to be a flash of light. Lumu almost thought he was blind. The dish could shine. It was really shining just now. Hot and sour potato shredded, done. Bufang put down the utensils, frowned, and wiped the water stains on his hands. Without the god of cooking set, he felt a little uncomfortable. The head chef's lips were trembling. He looked at Bufang in disbelief. When the dish was formed, there seemed to be light flowing around it. Although it was just a simple dish of sour and spicy shredded potatoes, the fragrance in the air was just right and the sour and spicy taste was just right. This dish looked ordinary, but it wasn't simple at all. The head chef swallowed and grabbed the ladle. He scooped up a spoonful of light golden hot and sour potato shredded. Looking carefully, he could see that each potato shredded had the same thickness. This was the perfect knife skill. Moreover, the taste and heat control of each potato shredded were exactly the same. A spoonful of potato shredded entered his mouth. The head chef's eyes narrowed. Oh! The head chef narrowed his eyes, his face blushing. His clothes fluttered. He felt like he was riding a horse, galloping on the prairie. galloping on the horse, elegant and unrestrained. The wind was blowing, the horse was neighing, and the potatoes were rolling under his feet. The sour and spicy taste, the soft and tender potatoes combined together, it was like a delicacy in the world, making people drown in it. The head chef grabbed the ladle, his feet clasped together. His body was shaking, as if he was shivering. He had never eaten such delicious food. Was this really a delicacy that humans could cook? Wasn't this the masterpiece of God? The head chef's eyes were red, and he seemed to be about to cry. Lu Mu was dumbfounded. Looking at the head chef's reaction, he felt as if he was possessed by a ghost. Damn it. It's just a hot and sour potato shredded. Why are you so moved? Lu Mu screamed in his heart. The aroma lingering in the air made him somewhat incredulous. He didn't believe that Bufang, who used to be at the same level as him, could make such a dish. He grabbed a porcelain spoon and scooped up a spoonful of potato shredded. Shoving it into his mouth, he chewed, not caring about how hot it was. Chewing, Lu Mu's movements stopped. His body froze, and his eyes were slightly absent-minded. He felt as if his soul had floated away. This dish reminded him of the dishes his elderly grandmother had cooked for him when he was a child. That smell, that feeling, made his nose tingle involuntarily. He couldn't help but shed tears. How could there be such a delicious hot and sour potato shredded in this world? Rumble. Looking at the reaction of the head chef and Lu Mu, Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, a rumbling sound rang out. Bufang furrowed his brows and looked out the window. He looked out the window. There, thunderclouds were gathering, and terrifying rumbles were condensing within. In those thunderclouds, mighty spiritual energy was surging, as if an invisible force had locked onto him. Bufang's eyes narrowed. Lightning punishment? There's lightning punishment when cooking on Earth. Bufang looked straight at the sky as if he wanted to see through the thunderclouds. However, soon, the thunderclouds dispersed. It was as if they had gathered and appeared to give Bufang a warning. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Was he going to stop him from cooking? Chapter 1592. While Bufang was paying attention to Lei Yun, the plate of spicy and sour shredded potatoes had been emptied. The head chef and Lu Mu were eating one spoon at a time. They were enjoying it. While eating, they were still immersed in the delicious sour and spicy shredded potatoes. They had never thought that an ordinary dish could actually be so delicious. This dish, which they had eaten countless times, could actually tug at their heartstrings like this. Could it be that the sour and spicy shredded potatoes they had eaten before were fake? When the last shredded potato was pinched by Lu Mu's fingers and thrown into his mouth, the plate of shredded potatoes was completely finished. Delicious. It's so delicious. Lu Mu smacked his lips and looked at Bufang with amazement in his eyes. Is this Bufang whose cooking skills are almost the same as mine? Could it be that this kid has been hiding in the small rented house for several days to improve his cooking skills? But this improvement is too fast, isn't it? Cooking is a slow work that produces fine work. Which world-class chef hasn't spent decades immersing in a craft? But how old is Bufang? The head chef wiped his mouth with a cloth towel. His eyes were a little complicated. He was still teaching Bufang and telling Bufang not to slack off in his cooking training. In the end, Bufang's cooking skills made him, the head chef, feel a little ashamed. Is this really Bufang? He had always been optimistic about Bufang because he thought that Bufang had a more passionate heart for cooking than Lu Mu. But he didn't expect that this passion could be transformed into cooking so fast. You've been enlightened, haven't you? Or have you got some secret books? The head chef joked with a smile. The way he looked at Bufang now was no longer the way he looked at a junior. Just this sour and spicy shredded potatoes was enough for Bufang to finish his apprenticeship. From today on, you can be independent, Bufang nodded. He didn't think much of it. His culinary skills had long surpassed the head chef's imagination. Whether it was his understanding of culinary skills or his focus, they were far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. What Bufang cared about now was who was restricting him. He had only made some shredded potatoes, but it had already triggered a warning from the thunder tribulation. Could it be? Bufang narrowed his eyes. After bidding farewell to the head chef, he left the kitchen. He came to the roof of the dilapidated building. Standing on the roof, the wind blew gently. He raised his head and looked at the boundless sky. The sky was clear and blue. The thunderclouds had appeared quickly and disappeared just as quickly. Below them was a busy street with high-rise buildings rising from the ground. The atmosphere of modernity was overwhelming. Bufang was slightly dazed. However, he quickly calmed his heart. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. Bufang slightly bent his legs. Then, a terrifying power seemed to erupt from his legs. Bang! Straightening his legs, Bufang's body shot up into the sky like a rocket. With a sonic boom, he soared into the sky. The wind blew Bufang's hair, but Bufang didn't care. He wanted to see what it was that was restricting him like this, the Great Path? Or some mysterious person. Bufang's movement wasn't small. At least, the old houses seemed to shake, making the people in the houses think it was an earthquake. Many people ran out and some even cursed. Soon, Bufang rushed into the clouds. Air currents kept gushing out. A heavy pressure fell on Bufang's shoulder. Bufang almost couldn't help but break the restraint. However, Bufang could feel that once he broke the restraint, Earth would be destroyed in a flash. This strange feeling made Bufang hesitate, but in the end, he chose to give up. Bang! After rushing out of the atmosphere, Bufang's clothes were already tattered. Standing in the starry sky, Bufang glanced around. His eyes were like a dragon, staring straight at the universe. The distant stars and the vast universe seemed to be trying to find that mysterious power. Unfortunately, everything was very peaceful. He furrowed his brows. Bufang didn't find anything strange. The pressure on his body made him fall back to earth. With a swooshing sound, he fell like a falling meteor. It was extremely fast. The satellites hovering around Earth captured this scene, which immediately caused many people to panic. What was that? A meteor? But why was a meteor in human form? Bang! Bufang fell to the ground, and his body seemed to still be steaming hot. Bufang's control of his strength was very balanced. Falling from a height of 10,000 meters, he didn't cause the ground to explode. No matter what secrets Earth had, Bufang felt that his main task now was to find the artifact spirits and let them return to the god of cooking set. Perhaps only in this way could he embark on the perfect path of becoming the god of cooking. Swoosh! Another rain of spiritual energy began to fall from the sky. The cold rain patted on Bufang's body, making Bufang feel a little sober. There was definitely something strange about this spiritual energy rain, but Bufang didn't know where exactly it was. He returned to the rented house and changed into a new set of clothes. Bufang went to the restaurant. It was a restaurant, but the business was as bleak as ever. It didn't match the chef's cooking skills. The chef sat in a chair, making tea and reading a book. Lu Mu was playing with his phone. They had long been used to this kind of life without customers. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before the restaurant closed down. "You're back." The chef smiled when he saw Bufang. "Since you're back, let's eat. I was going to ask you to cook." Lu Mu also put away his phone. His stomach was already rumbling with hunger. However, just as they were about to eat, footsteps suddenly rang out from outside the door. Bufang picked up some food with his chopsticks without batting an eyelid. At the chef's signal, Lu Mu ran over excitedly to serve the customer. "What would you like to eat? Just order whatever you want from the 8 major cuisines. The chefs in our restaurant can cook any cuisine," Lu Mu said with a smile, his face brimming with youthfulness. The customer sat down on a chair. He was wet all over, and when the spiritual energy rain rose, there was still spiritual energy escaping. It was a rather strange feeling. Lu Mu stopped laughing. His face darkened as he thought of the rumors about supernatural beings and ghosts that had been spreading around recently. You can cook any dish? The customer lowered his head and chuckled softly. His laughter was a little cold. Suddenly, the customer moved. He reached out, unzipped his jacket, and pulled out a lively carp that was still spitting bubbles. Make this fish into a dish. We don't accept people who bring their own ingredients here, Lu Mu said with an ugly expression. I told you to do it, so you do it. So much nonsense. If you don't do it well, you'll all be buried with this fish. The customer said with his head lowered. As he spoke, his clothes were still dripping with rainwater, which splashed and made one's hair stand on end. Lu Mu's mind went blank. What did this man say? If you don't cook well, you'll be buried with him? Or buried with the fish? This man must be joking. Go! The man bellowed. It was as if it could shock the soul. Lu Mu's body trembled. With a splash, the fat carp flew into his arms. The fat carp immediately flew into his arms. The slippery and cold feeling made Lu Mu's face turn pale with fright. He didn't know whether to leave or stay. I'll cook this fish. The chef put down his bowl and chopsticks, frowning as he stood up. It was rare to have a customer who brought his own ingredients, alas. This restaurant really can't stay open anymore. The chef walked to Lu Mu, reaching out his hand to grab the fish. Oh, this fish is quite fat. What do you want to make? Fish head tofu soup? The chef smiled, pinching the carp. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He had never seen such a fat fish before. It had been out of water for so long, but it could still jump like this. Up to you. If you do well, you'll be rewarded. If you don't, you'll be buried with it. The man still kept his head down. Bufang picked up a piece of meat and put it in his mouth, giving the customer a sideways glance. He seemed to feel something. That customer also slowly raised his head. His wet hair was tangled, and water droplets dripped down his face. It was a pale, bloodless face, with a pair of eyes that seemed to emit a ghostly green light. Bufang was surprised. He glanced at the man, then at the fat fish in the chef's hand. At this moment, the chef had brought the fish into the kitchen. He was very confident in his cooking skills. Looking at the fat fish, he even felt a little itchy. Seeing the chef enter the kitchen, Lu Mu was a little scared, shrinking to Bufang's side. He found that staying by Bufang's side gave him an inexplicable sense of security. He took out his phone, logged into the internet, and began to search for information. While he was searching, Bufang stood up, turning around and stepping into the kitchen. That fish just now was a little strange. Strange incident in Jiangdong City, looming restaurant on Peace Road. The chefs, including the chef and apprentices, all died tragically. Tianxin Street, Bayou Restaurant, the owner ran away, and the chef died tragically. Strange incidents happened frequently, and the chef suffered? Many fish scales were found in the restaurant where the chef died tragically. Lu Mu's face turned pale. His eyes stared at the information on his phone, his heart pounding. Of course, he knew Looming Restaurant. It was a very popular restaurant on Peace Road, and so was Bayou Restaurant. Although its business wasn't good, it wasn't bad either. However, the chefs of this restaurant all died tragically. And many fish scales were found in the restaurant? Fish scales? Lu Mu's lips were trembling. He suddenly felt that his hands were inexplicably slippery and disgusting, so he wiped them on his clothes. He looked up, looking for Bufang. He wanted to tell Bufang the news. Right now, only Bufang, whose expression didn't change, was the harbor of his soul. However, when he looked up, he found that Bufang wasn't there. The restaurant was extremely quiet. Only the sound of his breathing and the patter of the raindrops on the clothes of the customer behind him could be heard. F***ck. Why did you leave me here to grieve alone? Lu Mu felt suffocated and wanted to cry. He grabbed his phone, ready to stand up and sprint to the kitchen at the speed of a 100-meter sprint. However, before he could get up, a pale hand patted his shoulder. "Lu Mu, be quiet. You're very noisy." A hoarse voice rang out. Lu Mu's whole body trembled like a sieve. He suddenly turned his head and looked to his side. There he had a pale face and a pair of eyes that emitted an oily green glow. The twisted hair was dripping with water. At this moment, the green eyes were staring at Lu Mu. They were less than an inch away. In the kitchen, the chef grabbed the fish and put it into the basket. He was naturally good at cooking fish. Of course, he was originally going to make fish head tofu soup. However, after thinking about it, the fish meat would be wasted if he made fish head tofu soup. He was afraid that the customers would think that he was cheating on the fish, so he changed the dish. He was going to cook live fish. He was much better at this. Instead of processing the fish first, he prepared other ingredients. He took out the ingredients from the large refrigerator. Cucumber, bean sprouts, black fungus, and other ingredients were arranged, cut, processed, and put into a plate. On the other side, he prepared the bottom of the pot to cook the fish. The most important thing about the fish was the taste of the bottom of the pot. When Bufang walked into the kitchen, the chef had already begun to process the fish. Holding the sharp knife in his hand, he grabbed the fat fish from the basket and prepared to scrape the scales. Bufang stood at the door of the kitchen, watching calmly. The chef's movements were methodical. After the fish scales were scraped off, the fish scales flew and splashed on the ground, making a slight sound. He removed the scales, removed the bones, sliced the fish, and put it into the oil pan. The chef's series of operations were methodical. Gurgle, gurgle. A spoonful of oil was poured into the stainless steel basin. The sliced cucumber and black fungus were faintly visible in it. After sprinkling a few chopped green onions, the boiled fish was done. The chef turned around with the basin in his hand. He was slightly stunned when he saw Bufang. "Bufang, why are you here?" "I'll serve the fish to the customers. You can clean up the kitchen," the chef said with a smile. Then, he walked past Bufang and walked out of the kitchen. Bufang turned his head and looked at the boiled fish in the stainless steel basin. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Then, Bufang walked to the stove. The ground was scattered with fish scales. On the stove, the fish bones were scattered. Bufang exhaled. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at the basket. Immediately, from the basket, he grabbed a lively, plump fish. It was the fat carp that the strange customer took out. At this moment, the fat carp was baring its teeth at Bufang. Chapter 1593. Bufang looked at the carp that was baring its teeth at him. It was like a clown jumping in front of him. There was something strange about this carp. From the moment he entered the door, Bufang had sensed the rich spiritual energy in the carp. Because of the excessive spiritual energy, the carp had gained intelligence. Obviously, this was not an ordinary carp. According to the saying on Earth, this carp had become a spirit. Bufang pinched the carp, feeling a little puzzled. Since the carp was here, what kind of fish did the chef cook just now? Did the chef bring the wrong fish? That shouldn't be the case. The carp struggled in Bufang's hand as if it wanted to break free. However, Bufang's hand was like a pincer that held its body tightly. No matter how he tried, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free. The carp seemed to be a little anxious. The spiritual energy in its body circulated. Then, its body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. The teeth in its mouth became extremely sharp, and its body was also covered with sharp spikes. From a harmless fat carp, it had turned into a fierce man-eating giant fish. Bufang calmly looked at the carp's transformation. Was this the effect of the recovery of spiritual energy? This kind of existence, which could be called a demon, could run amok in the city without fear. Since even fish could mutate, there must be some humans who had mutated. This Earth was different from the Earth in his memory. Looking at the carp that was baring its teeth, Bufang glanced at it. The carp slammed its tail on the stove, making a loud squeaking sound. A moment later, the giant fish pounced on Bufang. After the founding of the country, you can't become a spirit. Don't you know that? Bufang raised the corner of his mouth. Looking at the carp that was pouncing on him, he said calmly. Then, he raised his hand and flicked his finger. With a bang, it hit the carp's head. The giant carp instantly turned into a small carp in the air like a deflated balloon. It fell on the ground, flapping its tail. This is what a fish should look like, Bufang said lightly. Zhang Xian flicked his finger. Instantly, the kitchen knife on the knife rack fell into Bufang's hand. The kitchen knife spun. The fish on the chopping board had lost its spiritual energy and had lost its intelligence. It was no different from an ordinary carp. The chef carried the stainless steel basin filled with boiled fish out of the kitchen. The scene in the restaurant stunned him. Lu Mu and the customer sat together, facing each other. Their heads were lowered, and Lu Mu's body was trembling. The head chef was puzzled and wanted to ask, but he was interrupted by the customer. Are the dishes ready? The customer said. The chef ignored Lu Mu for the time being and placed the basin in the center of the table. This is boiled fish, made with the carp you provided. Have a taste. The head chef took out a cloth towel, wiped his hands, and said with a smile. He was very satisfied with his food. If it's not done well, you'll be buried with that fish, the customer said hoarsely. The customer said in a hoarse voice. His voice was like grinding on sand, giving people goosebumps. At this moment, the head chef also felt a little strange. Combined with Lu Mu's reaction, his heart skipped a beat. However, before the chef could finish his sentence, the customer grabbed his chopsticks and stabbed them into the boiled live fish. After a series of messy fishing, oil splashed everywhere. The aroma of the boiled fish filled the air. The head chef's face didn't look good, and it was getting paler. Because he found that there was no fish meat in the boiled fish. How could it be? Did he see a ghost? He was the one who slaughtered the fish, and he was the one who scraped the scales and cut the fish meat into pieces. Where did the fish meat go? Why was there no fish in the boiled fish? My fish. Where did it go? The customer put down his chopsticks, his voice a little depressed. That terrifying voice made the head chef's body shiver uncontrollably. Everything was so strange that he felt a chill run down his spine. I clearly don't say any more. Get ready to die with my fish, the customer sneered. He lifted his head, revealing his pale face. His eyes glowed green. The customer's mouth twitched. Then, he reached out his hand, pinching the lower hem of his lips, making a small arc. He blew hard, and a sharp whistle rang out. Now, all of you, die with my fish, the customer sneered crazily. He was looking forward to it. Lu Mu and the head chef sat on their chairs in disbelief. What had happened to them? Was this still the world they knew? Tap, tap. Suddenly, a series of clear footsteps rang out. The faces of the head chef and the others changed. The customer was also bewildered. He raised his head, looking at the kitchen. A skinny figure slowly walked out from it. My fish. The customer was bewildered. Then, his nose twitched, smelling the rich aroma in the air. It was the smell of boiled fish. Bufang walked out with the boiled fish, placing the dish in front of the customer. Here's your fish, Bufang said calmly. The customer was dumbfounded. Lu Mu and the head chef were also shaking. They suddenly admired Bufang. They admired Bufang's bravery. Look, is this your fish? Bufang said. The customer's eyes shrank. He reached out his chopsticks, stabbing them into the boiled fish. As he picked it up, a piece of white and tender fish floated on it. The customer's face became paler, and his body trembled. My fish, the customer was bewildered. Then, the green light in his eyes shone brightly. How dare you cook my fish? He roared. The customer stood up abruptly. The water on his body dripped faster and faster. It was as if he had been fished out of a pool. This scene made the head chef and Lu Mu shrink in a corner, feeling more and more frightened. However, Bufang's face was still calm. He had seen all kinds of storms. A threat of this level was nothing to him. Compared with the horror of Soul 13, the customer in front of him was like a Peppa Pig waving its fist. Sure enough, after unleashing his aura, the customer turned and ran. He was about to rush out of the restaurant. "Did I say you could go?" Bufang said indifferently, standing where he was with his hands clasped behind his back. As soon as he finished speaking, the customer, who was about to rush out of the restaurant, froze. The next moment, he ran out even more crazily. Bufang twitched his mouth. With a thought, the divine sense compressed in his spirit sea immediately spread out. Buzz, the moment the customer sensed the divine sense, he knelt on the ground with a thud. Although Bufang's divine sense could only cover a radius of 10 meters, it was not a problem for it to suppress this man. Bufang slowly walked to the front of the customer and looked down at him from above. You are a chi cultivator," the customer said in horror. He was a little regretful at this moment. How could one not wet his shoes if he always stood by the river? After all, he had encountered a chi cultivator. A chi cultivator? Bufang raised his eyebrows. "You can say that," Bufang said lightly. Then, too lazy to respond, he raised his hand. This man must have obtained some evil beast-taming technique, found a carp with spiritual energy, and raised it into a monster. The carp was originally docile, but under this man's control, it ate human flesh. Then, it became not docile anymore. A beast that ate human flesh could not be kept alive, because it would become addicted to the taste of human flesh. Therefore, Bufang could conclude that the guy in front of him was not a good person. If he had not returned to Earth, the consequences might have been unimaginable. "Spare me! Exalted immortal, spare me!" The moment Bufang raised his hand, the man knelt in front of Bufang and kept kowtowing. His face was full of horror. The pressure that Bufang gave him was too great. "Spare me? Why should I spare you?" Bufang said expressionlessly. "I can exchange information. I know there's a nine-tailed fox nearby. I know the whereabouts of this nine-tailed fox." The man hurriedly kowtowed and revealed the information in order to save his life. "We beast tamers have been fighting over this nine-tailed fox. I just want to improve my strength so that I can have a place in the competition. Now that the national agency is also involved, if I don't improve my little carp's ability, I will lose any chance to compete, and I will also lose my chance in the general trend of the future," the man said unwillingly. For beast tamers, the nine-tailed fox was simply a divine beast. If one could tame it, one could stand at the peak of Earth. However, he did not realize that when he finished speaking, the pressure on his body was increasing. Bufang's face was as gloomy as water. Nine-tailed fox? Was he talking about Little Hu? Little Hu was now a nine-tailed fox. Was Little Hu in danger? But even if Little Hu's strength was suppressed, he was not someone that a cat or dog in front of him could covet. Could it be that something had happened? Nine-tailed fox? If it's really a nine-tailed fox, this little carp will only be courting death if he goes there, Bufang said. No. Exalted immortal, there's something you don't know. That nine-tailed fox is seriously injured for some reason. All the beast tamers and superhumans in Jiangdong are coveting it. Suddenly, he felt his body float up. He was lifted by a supreme force. This made his heart skip a beat. He felt that Bufang's strength was unfathomable. "Take me there or die," Bufang said lightly. After the disaster of the Soul Demon, Bufang's murderous aura had become much stronger. Just a wisp of it was enough to make the beast tamer piss his pants. In the distance, Lu Mu and the head chef looked as if they were watching a myth. Their eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that Bufang? What happened? Why did the customer run away as if he had seen a devil when he saw Bufang?" Of course, what subverted their understanding the most was the customer who was floating in midair. His means were like that of an immortal. Bufang put down the beast tamer and asked him to lead the way. Bufang was very excited to hear from Little Hu, but if anything happened to Little Hu, Bufang would never spare anyone. If Little Hu is injured, what about you, who was separated from him? Who on earth could hurt Little Hu? Even if Little Hu's cultivation base was suppressed like me, his fleshly body was not something that anyone on earth could deal with. He thought of the spiritual energy rain. Bufang's brows furrowed. Could it be that there are also powerful cultivators on earth? And the arrival of me, Little Hu, and you has attracted the attention of these cultivators? The thunder tribulation that spied on me and warned me was also caused by these cultivators? Bufang frowned deeply. No wonder the system said that Earth is not safe. The artifact spirit of this god of cooking set is really not that easy to awaken. Chapter 1594. Bufang took the customer away. Lu Mu and the head chef were left behind, horrified. They looked at each other, feeling that it was all a dream. Lu Mu swallowed hard. Are all the rumors on the internet true? An extraordinary person has really appeared. Moreover, it happened right beside him. Lu Mu's eyes lit up. Then, without hesitation, he wrote a post on the forum about what he had seen and heard today and posted it. The customer was a beast master. In fact, he could be considered a kind of superhuman who had comprehended the ability to communicate with animals. Of course, his ability was limited because he had comprehended it when he was drowning. So, whenever he controlled a spirit beast, his whole body would be wet, like a water monster crawling out of the water. At that time, he was on the verge of despair, but the emergence of this ability made him feel that God might not want him to die. So he worked hard to survive. However, he hated human beings, so he constantly ordered his little carp to harm them. He was a man with a twisted mind. At this moment, he was walking in front with his head bowed, but his eyes flashed with resentment from time to time. His identity was very sensitive. He was a criminal that the state agency had been chasing. However, once he showed up this time, he would definitely become the target of the state agency. In fact, he didn't want to go near the nine-tailed fox so early. But there was nothing he could do. The fellow behind him was like a high and mighty god staring at him, causing him to feel so pressured that he couldn't breathe. If there was a chance, he really wanted to escape. The two of them took a taxi, left the city, and came to the suburbs. The sky was once again raining spiritual energy. But this time, the spiritual energy rain was very small. The Beast Master was madly and greedily drenched in the rain. He liked the feeling of being drenched. Because of the spiritual energy contained in the rain, his strength was continuously increasing. The nine-tailed fox is on this mountain, the Beast Master said. He turned his head and glanced at Bufang, his eyes flashing with resentment. On the mountain? Bufang narrowed his eyes and glanced at the towering mountain. The mountain path was hidden in the shade of the trees, looking a little dark and gloomy. Since you know about Nine-Tailed Fox, do you know the woman beside Nine-Tailed Fox? Bufang thought for a while and asked. The beast tamer was taken aback. Woman? Why would Nine-Tailed Fox have a woman by her side? No. Nine-Tailed Fox fled into the mountains to avoid being surrounded. There were no women by her side at all. Also, let me remind you, once you set foot on this mountain path, you'll enter everyone's target range. China's Special Ability Agency, many beast tamers, and some chi cultivators from hidden families will pay attention to you. At that time, it won't be so easy for you to save the nine-tailed fox. The beast tamer said. Go ahead. Bufang looked at him expressionlessly. The beast tamer had no choice but to step onto the mountain path. As soon as they stepped onto the mountain path, Bufang could feel the spiritual energy gushing out from the ground, becoming increasingly resplendent. It was so bright that he could not help but narrow his eyes. The beast tamer's eyes suddenly lit up. He knew that his chance to escape had come. Taking advantage of the moment when Bufang's eyes were dazzled, the beast tamer madly ran toward the mountain path. Ignoring the branches, he directly rushed into the forest and disappeared. Escape? The corners of Bufang's mouth rose slightly. He patted Xiaopi on his shoulder. Shrimpy's compound eyes rolled around. Then, it let out a squeaking sound. With a ripping sound, it shot out, turned into a golden thread, and disappeared in an instant. After a while, a miserable howl came from the dense forest. The howl only lasted for a moment before it stopped abruptly. Swish! The golden light shot back, once again falling on Bufang's shoulder. Xiaopi lay on it, his whole body dazzling with golden light. In the dark, there seemed to be many people sucking in a breath of cold air. Those were the gasps of the people who had been spying on Bufang after he stepped onto the mountain path. Someone's coming. It seems to be a beast tamer. What's that thing? A golden mantis shrimp? Mantis shrimp also has such a strong fighting ability? What level of beast tamer is this? In the dark, many people were muttering. Bufang naturally knew these people. Needless to say, Bufang also knew that these people should be beast tamers or supernatural users. Of course, they were supernatural users without official certification. Bufang did not pay attention to them. With his hands clasped behind his back, he continued to move forward. The mountain path was very rugged and it was a steep slope. Along the way, only half of the cement road was paved. The rest was either a muddy road or a bluestone road. Bufang did not know Little Hu's specific location. But as long as he kept going up, he would be right. Halfway up the mountain, Bufang was stopped by someone. It was a group of people wearing khaki windbreakers, both men and women. They expressionlessly blocked Bufang's way, not letting Bufang continue to go up. "Sir, it's dangerous up there. Please go back the way you came." A middle-aged man with an unlit cigarette in his mouth stopped Bufang and said to Bufang, asking Bufang to go back. "What happened up there?" Bufang asked expressionlessly. The man in the windbreaker glanced at Bufang and said, "Nothing. There was a mudslide and the road was blocked." He seemed to feel that Bufang was acting strange, and Xiaopi on Bufang's shoulder made him a little suspicious. "Mudslide?" Bufang was stunned, then he curled his lips. "That should be just an excuse. Isn't it the nine-tailed fox?" "Huh. You know about the nine-tailed fox. Are you a beast tamer?" The middle-aged man was stunned. "Impossible. I know all the beast tamers in Jiangdong, and there's no one like you. Who are you? Are you a beast tamer from another city?" The middle-aged man's eyes became more and more serious. Had the news about the nine-tailed fox spread? If beast tamers from other cities or even other provinces came here, he was afraid that the Jiangdong branch might not be able to handle them. Not to mention that there were many superhumans eyeing them. Bufang shook his head and said nothing. "Let me go up the mountain." "No, sir, please go back." The man in the windbreaker became serious. He took out his ID and handed it to Bufang. Hoping that Bufang would back off. The man was ready to deal with Bufang. However, to his surprise, Bufang really backed off after seeing his ID. He put his hands behind his back and walked away unhurriedly. "Oh, this ID is quite useful. Chief Luo, the distribution of spiritual energy is getting thicker and thicker. The number of superhumans and beast tamers on Crouching Tiger Mountain has exceeded 100. A young and beautiful girl wearing a pair of headphones and holding a computer said to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man, who was called Chief Luo, looked more and more serious. "Xiao AI, did you see that man? Can you help me check the number of spiritual energy points he has? What level is he at?" Chief Luo said, frowning as he watched Bufang's back. The girl nodded. After locking on to Bufang's position, she began to search for him on the computer. Chief Luo, That man doesn't have any spiritual energy point. Maybe he's just an ordinary person. Ordinary person? He's definitely not an ordinary person, Chief Luo thought to himself. How's the situation with the nine-tailed fox? Is the beast-binding rope working? Chief Luo asked. The beast-binding rope is a weapon we modeled after the immortal artifacts of ancient myths and legends. It has a great suppressive effect on spirit beasts born after the revival of spiritual energy. Although this nine-tailed fox is an S-class spirit beast, under the suppression of the beast-binding rope, its spiritual energy points have weakened to A-class, Xiao AI said, typing on the keyboard. Very good. Keep it up. When the nine-tailed fox's spiritual energy points drop to B-class, we'll strike immediately. Capture the nine-tailed fox. We have to be fast. The appearance of the S-class nine-tailed fox has attracted the attention of all parties. Beast tamers outside the city and even foreign superhumans are coveting it. I've asked the headquarters for help, but we have to deal with it quickly ourselves. We can't give the enemy a chance, Chief Luo said. Chief Luo said. In the distance, the team members hidden in the darkness nodded in agreement. Suddenly Chief Luo froze. Because in the distance, the young man who had left had returned once again. Xiao AI detected that this young man had no spiritual energy point. Was he really an ordinary person? But how could an ordinary person know about the nine-tailed fox? Could it be that the netizens who liked to watch the fun had gotten wind of it? Well, what are you going to do when you catch the nine-tailed fox? Bufang looked at Chief Luo with a straight face. Bring her back to the headquarters and imprison her. The nine-tailed fox is very dangerous. For the safety of the people, she must be imprisoned. Chief Luo didn't know why, but he couldn't help telling this to the young man in front of him. Oh. Bufang nodded. Then, he clasped his hands behind his back, turned, and left. Xiao AI thought that Bufang might be a psychopath. Suddenly, Bufang turned around again and came up to them. Chief Luo and Xiao AI were speechless. Sir, please leave at once, or we will temporarily arrest you. Xiao AI frowned and shouted coldly. Her voice faded away. In the distance, a few men in the same trench coats slowly approached. Well, I've thought about it carefully. I think the nine-tailed fox might be my little Hu fox, who got separated from me. So, I can't let you take her away. That little Hu fox is used to my cooking, and she may not be used to your food. Bufang said seriously after thinking for a moment. Xiaopi, who was perched on his shoulder, also raised her head and nodded. Chief Luo. The corner of Xiao AI's mouth twitched. She looked at Bufang as if he was a fool. You can continue to fool me if the nine-tailed fox is your pet. Why don't you say that you are a god? Sir, your unreasonable behavior has gone beyond our tolerance and seriously hindered our work. So, we plan to temporarily arrest you and let you go when the matter is over. Chief Luo said seriously. Xiao AI, raise your hand. Ah! That gave Xiao AI pause. Instinctively, she raised her hand. Suddenly, with a click, a pair of ice-cold handcuffs were cuffed on her hands, and the other side of the handcuffs was cuffed to Bufang's slender and fair hands. You're a technician, so you don't have to participate in the capture. I'll let you watch over this guy for the time being. Chief Luo cleared his throat and said. Then, he turned and left, ignoring Xiao AI's murderous glare. Bufang raised his hand and glanced at the handcuffs, which were as thin as paper. The corner of his mouth twitched. Are they playing house? You'd better behave yourself. Let me tell you, I'm also a professional with a C-class supernatural ability. Don't try anything funny. I'm very powerful. Xiao AI had no choice but to say to Bufang fiercely, glaring at Bufang. A moment later, oh, Xiaopi is so cute. I didn't know that mantis shrimps could be so cute. Xiao AI, handcuffed together, sat on the side and played with Xiaopi. As for Bufang, he sat where he was, expressionless and motionless. Xiao AI chattered as she played with Xiaopi. But no matter what she said, Bufang did not bat an eyelid. Suddenly Bufang frowned and turned to look at the top of the mountain. A whistling sound rang out. In the dense forest around him, all kinds of sounds could be heard. In the distance, Chief Luo rose to his feet. They finally can't wait any longer. Everyone, follow me up the mountain. Chief Luo's eyes became sharp. With a rumble, his hair burst into flames, and he seemed to have turned into a man of fire. The surrounding team members also unleashed their supernatural abilities. They followed Chief Luo and rushed toward the top of the mountain. Xiao Ai, stay where you are. Keep an eye on this mister. Chief Luo's voice drifted over from afar. Xiao Ai, who had excitedly turned on her computer and was about to set off, was dumbfounded. Bufang glanced at Xiao Ai and asked, "Hey, do you know a beast tamer who raises small carps?" A beast tamer who raises carps? Let me see." Xiao Ai paused and typed on the computer for a while. "I found him. Are you talking about the B-class beast tamer we're chasing, Zhang He? Are you going to provide us with information?" Xiao Ai was stunned. A B-class beast tamer was a terrifying existence. Bufang looked at Xiao Ai, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly as he said, "Oh, so his name is Zhang He. That, just now, on the way here, I accidentally killed him. Is that considered information?" Xiao Ai. Chapter 1595. Bufang was not very worried about Little Hu. Even if Little Hu fell to the mortal world, he was not someone these superhumans could deal with. After all, Little Hu was already a god, and he had been eating the dishes cooked by Bufang, the God Emperor, every day. The transformation of his fleshly body was far beyond that of ordinary spirit beasts. Even in the starry sky, he was one of the top beasts. Even if he lay on the ground and was bombarded by these superhumans, he would be unscathed. At most, he would lose a few strands of hair. Take Bufang, for example. Bufang's fleshly body was much stronger than that of the ancient gods and immortals. He might even be able to withstand a nuclear bomb head-on. Xiao Ai was a little speechless. Bufang's casual words left her at a loss. The Beastmaster who raised the carp was a B-class Beastmaster, just like the B-class superhumans. He was a very powerful existence. On Earth, where the spiritual energy was abundant, he was already a very powerful person. However, just now Bufang said that he would kill the Beastmaster. "You must be joking." Xiao Ai gave a hollow laugh. In her eyes, Bufang, who was originally harmless, seemed to have turned into a devil. She looked at the expressionless Bufang, then at the handcuffs on her hands. For a moment she wished she could strangle Chief Luo. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. Then, he reached out his hand. Bufang's palm was very fair and slender, like the fingers of a pianist. Crack! The handcuffs were broken by Bufang as easily as tearing a piece of paper. The hollow smile on Xiao Ai's face froze. You'd better watch yourself. I'm a C-class superhuman. You don't think about doing bad things." Xiao Ai wanted to cry. The corners of her mouth were trembling, and she could not even hold the laptop in her hands. Bufang was too lazy to talk to her. He raised his hand and pointed his finger at Xiao Ai's forehead. Buzz that spread out like a ripple. Xiao Ai immediately sat on the ground, lowered her head, and fainted. With his hands behind his back, Bufang strode up the mountain. In the dense forest on both sides, the sound of shuttling could be heard. Obviously, many people were rushing to the top of the mountain. Bufang narrowed his eyes. He was very calm and unhurried. Looking at the distant mountain road, Bufang was actually in a trance. He didn't know if all this was real or just an illusion. Or was it his own inner demon? If all of this was true, then where was the chaotic universe that Earth belonged to? Earth must be different from the chaotic universe where the Xiai divine dynasty was located. Which chaotic universe does Earth belong to? Bufang furrowed his brows and stopped thinking about it. With his hands behind his back, he continued to ascend. After a while, Bufang reached the top of the mountain. Xiaopi, who had been lying listlessly on Bufang's shoulder, suddenly perked up and kept squeaking. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth and rubbed Xiaopi's head. "Have you sensed little Hu? Call her." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaopi's compound eyes lit up, and his body turned into a beam of golden light, hovering in the air. Buzz, there seemed to be invisible sound waves spreading out from his body. Swoosh, birds and beasts were flying in the dense forest. An uproar swept through the forest. At the top of the mountain, a roar suddenly burst out. Then, a white figure instantly appeared and shot out at high speed. Then, a white figure appeared in a flash and sped through the trees. "It's here. A nine-tailed fox. Good heavens! It's really a nine-tailed fox. A legendary spirit beast. I'm going to tame it. I'm going to be its master." The beast masters who were paying attention to the nine-tailed fox went crazy. They sped crazily toward Little Hu's location. Chief Luo and his subordinates were also energized. They were holding silver guns in their hands. In fact, firearms were the most suitable weapons for beastmasters to deal with them. Because their bodies were weak, a single bullet could take their lives. What made beastmasters strong was that they could tame the spirit beasts that had mutated due to the awakening of spiritual energy. Their strength was in instructing spirit beasts to fight. Unlike superhumans, superhumans had strange abilities that could strengthen their bodies, make them stronger, and make them unafraid of firearms. Chief Luo's existence made the beastmasters very afraid. An arcanist with firearms was a nightmare for beast tamers. However, it was impossible for them to give up on the nine-tailed fox. Chief Luo held his gun, his head on fire. He stared excitedly at the nine-tailed fox in the distance. 9 fox tails were swaying. Their snow-white fur was extremely beautiful. In the dark night they were like sparkling white snow, extremely beautiful. So beautiful! This kind of creature is simply unbearable to be desecrated. It's a pity that he was born in the wrong era. Chief Luo sighed. Then, he looked at his men and said with a frown, "Attack." This nine-tailed fox's spiritual energy has been reduced to A class. We have the best chance of success if we attack now. At Chief Luo's order, the men behind him immediately moved. Several superhumans rushed into the dense forest with silver guns in their hand. Using the trees as cover, they kept approaching Little Hu. Buzz, a superhuman, walked out from behind a tree, his body turning transparent. Another superhuman turned into a puddle of water and slowly approached Little Hu. All kinds of means emerged one after another. You want to take the nine-tailed fox for yourself? Your State Ability Users Bureau is too greedy. A whistle rang out. The next moment, a whistling sound rang out from the dense forest. A green-eyed ash wolf whizzed out of the forest and rushed toward the nine-tailed fox. The ash wolf's body grew larger as it ran, and its fur was as sharp as steel needles. It slapped the ground with its paws, kicking up a cloud of dust as it shot forward at great speed. "Damn it!" Chief Luo cursed. He raised his hand and threw a fireball at the ash wolf. With a boom, the fireball exploded and dissipated in the air. "Attack!" Chief Luo bellowed. The paranormals who had hidden themselves suddenly appeared and pounced on Foxy one after another. However, they were not as fast as the ash wolf. Before they could get close, the ash wolf had already closed in on the nine-tailed fox. "Damn it! That's Lu Changhe, an A-class beast master. How dare he show up here?" Chief Luo's face was very unsightly. He felt that the mission might fail. If Lu Changhe managed to tame the nine-tailed fox, he would most likely grow into an S-class beast master. When that happened, the State Supernatural Bureau would be in trouble. In the dark, a figure showed an excited look. He stared at the ash wolf that was pouncing toward the nine-tailed fox. As long as he could tame the nine-tailed fox, his ability would improve again. At that time, there would be another S-class beastmaster in the world. All of a sudden, the man's gaze froze. The ash wolf that was approaching Little Who had its mouth wide open, but it had yet to bite down. The nine-tailed fox raised its paw. With a pop, it was as if it had popped a balloon. It directly smashed the ash wolf into pieces. Chief Luo, Lu Changha, all the surrounding superhumans. Bang! The ash wolf's huge carcass fell to the ground. Blood flowed everywhere, and the pungent smell of blood spread. The surrounding people were dumbfounded. The superhumans who were about to approach felt a chill run down their spines. Wasn't the strength of the nine-tailed fox suppressed by the beast-binding rope to A-class? Why was it killed with a single slap of its paw when facing an A-class ash wolf? Chief Luo sucked in a breath of cold air. Retreat. Everyone retreat. The nine-tailed fox could now be classified as an extremely dangerous spirit beast. That slap just now could not have been unleashed without the power of an S-class. The nine-tailed fox's eyes darted around, and it opened its mouth as if it was yawning. The next moment it dashed out. Its 9 tails wagged. Then, it pierced through the air and disappeared. Chief Luo. Should we still chase after it? Several of his subordinates looked at Chief Luo with hesitation on their faces. The anger on Chief Luo's head had dissipated. He gritted his teeth and said, "Chase after it? We can't let the 9-tailed fox fall into the hands of others, let alone those foreigners." The next moment, a group of people chased after the 9-tailed fox. The 9-tailed fox was very beautiful. She ran through the forest at a very fast speed. Her nose twitched as if she had smelled something. Following the smell, she sped all the way. Suddenly, there was the sound of an explosion on both sides of the forest. Sparks flew everywhere. Bullets flew toward her and entered her body. Ding, ding, ding. Bullets flew everywhere. Little Who's eyes swept across the forest and stopped abruptly. In the distance, in the forest, superhumans wrapped in black explosion-proof suits appeared one after another, holding strange weapons in their hands. The leader of the group whispered to each other in English. The next moment, he waved his hand, signaling for them to attack. Chief Luo's expression changed dramatically when he arrived. "It's a foreign superpower organization. Damn it! Why haven't the reinforcements from our headquarters arrived yet?" Chief Luo was a little anxious. The 9-tailed fox tilted her head, narrowed her eyes, and looked at the group of superhumans in explosion-proof suits slowly approaching her. A majestic energy began to condense in her mouth. A fragrant aroma slowly diffused in the air. Everyone's expression became strange. "What's that smell? Why does it smell so good? It smells a little like beef meatballs. Who would eat beef meatballs in this wilderness? Beef meatballs smell so good? Which restaurant sells it?" The people around exchanged glances. They had not realized that the smell of beef meatballs came from the fox's mouth. Just as Little Who was about to spit out the explosive meatball, the clear sound of footsteps rang out. The surrounding ability users were all stunned. They all narrowed their eyes and looked at the figure who had entered the area. It was a thin young man with a buzz cut and an expressionless face. Step by step, he approached the 9-tailed fox. "Who's that? Is he a beastmaster? That can't be right. There's no such person among the beastmasters from the river east. I don't know him. Could he be a beastmaster from another province? Or a beastmaster from Sakura?" Many people frowned and began to mutter. The arcanists in explosion-proof suits stopped moving. They were determined to get the 9-tailed fox. However, the expressions of Chief Luo and the team members behind him became very strange. Isn't that guy? Didn't the chief handcuff him to Xiao AI? Xiao AI said this man has no spiritual energy, so he should be an ordinary person. How can an ordinary person be so bold? The team members were muttering. Chief Luo's face grew more and more unsightly. He watched as Bufang walked step by step toward the 9-tailed fox. The 9-tailed fox, which was comparable to an S-class spirit beast. "Don't come any closer. Run." Chief Luo's face was extremely unsightly. However, as soon as he finished speaking in the distance, the foreign superhumans in explosion-proof suits sneered and pulled the trigger. Bang! 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 Sparks flew everywhere. One bullet after another shot toward the nine-tailed fox and the young man who was approaching it. If nothing went wrong, the young man would be turned into a sieve in an instant. He was dead. Chief Luo's face was extremely unsightly. The team members behind him and the beastmasters hidden among them were also somewhat angry. How could a foreign superhuman be so arrogant? How could they bring weapons into their country? It was a pity that the young man would die a tragic death. The corners of Bu Fang's mouth curved upward slightly. Xiaopi, on his shoulder, straightened her upper body and danced. In the distance, when little Hu saw Bu Fang, her eyes softened. She lowered her head, leaned close to Bu Fang and stroked Bu Fang's face. She stuck out her tongue and licked Bu Fang's face. She was quite docile. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. One by one, the bullets drew an arc in the air, approaching him at high speed. Just when everyone thought that Bu Fang was going to die, the bullets that were an inch away from Bu Fang all froze in the air. Chapter 1596. The bullet froze in the void as if it was fixed by glue. It did not fall. It was a strange scene. At least, everyone present was dumbfounded. First, they were surprised by the friendly attitude of the nine-tailed fox toward the young man. Then, they were even more surprised when the bullet floated in midair. What kind of technique is this to freeze a bullet? Is he an S-class superhuman? And a mind-type superhuman? Chief Luo's mouth twitched. Sure enough, this guy is really a superhuman. I didn't expect him to disguise himself so well. Also, why is the nine-tailed fox so close to that guy? Suddenly, Chief Luo remembered what Bu Fang had said before. He raised the nine-tailed fox and was used to eating his dishes. Chief Luo was shocked when he thought of that. Could it be this nine-tailed fox was really raised by this guy? When did Hua have such an awesome beast master? And he appeared in Jiangdong City? Bu Fang rubbed Little Hu's head and held him in his arms. He held Foxy in his arms. There was a collar around Foxy's neck. It was made of metal, and there was a circle of red dots that were constantly flashing on it. This must be the so-called beast binding rope. Bu Fang frowned. He reached out and tore off the rope, then threw it on the ground like a piece of junk. Chief Luo was speechless. That was the beast binding rope specially researched by the State Supernatural Bureau. Even an S-class spirit beast could not break free from it. How could it be torn off like a piece of paper? The bullet was still floating in midair. The foreign superhumans were getting restless. Bang! 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 They did not believe it and fired again. Some snipers even aimed at Bu Fang's head and fired. In Hua, they were looters. Once they had captured the nine-tailed fox, they would retreat immediately. Therefore, they did not show any mercy. Kill whoever deserves to be killed. Buzz, however, when the bullets were an inch away from Bu Fang's body, they froze again. This scene was a little horrifying. Countless bullets were hovering around him, and the sight of them sent chills down one's spine. Is it fun? The corners of Bu Fang's mouth curled downwards as he said coldly. Then, he raised his hand, bent his finger, and flicked a bullet in the air. The bullets immediately changed their direction. Bang, bang, bang. The bullet bounced back. Its speed was even faster than before, and the whistling sound made one's scalp go numb. However, the foreign paranormals were fearless because they were wearing the latest explosion-proof suits and were immune to bullets. Bang! However, a metahuman wearing an explosion-proof suit collapsed. Two arcanists wearing explosive suits fell to the ground. Like sparrows, the foreign superhumans fell from the trees one by one and crashed to the ground, lifeless. The explosion-proof suits that they were so proud of, as well as the physical bodies of paranormals, did not give them any good resistance. Let's go. Let's go back. Bufang rubbed Little Hu's head and said softly. Then, he started walking down the mountain. He had come here to take Little Hu away. He did not care about anything else. What he cared about now was how to find the sleeping artifact spirit of the god of cooking set. Bufang had no clue at all, so his temper was not very good. The people around him were very quiet, not daring to breathe too loudly. What kind of existence was this? With just a flick of a finger, so many people from the foreign superhuman organization were killed? There were even A-class superhumans among them. Who was this young man? Could he be a chi cultivator? Chief Luo felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He did not dare to move at all. He wanted to stop Bufang, but when he saw the scattered bodies of the superhumans in the distance, in the end, he gave up. He watched as the young man left with the nine-tailed fox in his arms. Chief Luo, what should we do now? We've failed the mission, one of his subordinates asked Chief Luo with an unsightly face. Chief Luo took a deep breath. Let's go back. That young man's strength was unfathomable, and they were not fools to fight him head-on. The surrounding beast masters were not fools either. However, their desire for the nine-tailed fox did not diminish, and they all followed behind Bufang. Bufang went down the mountain and walked at a steady pace. Stroking Little Hu's soft fur, Bufang frowned and asked, "Where are Little Hu, do you know?" Little Hu looked up and shook his head, looking a little confused. Bufang was not surprised that Little Hu did not know where you were. It seems that it will be more difficult to find you. After all, Little Hu is a spirit beast, so he's a bigger target. Behind him, there were many faint auras following him, which were very obvious to Bufang's divine sense. Bufang did not like this. So, Bufang felt it necessary to give these people some warning. Holding Little Hu in his arms, Bufang stood still. Bufang's sudden stop startled the beastmasters hiding in the dark. They exhaled slightly. Then, Bufang looked up, opened his mouth and said lightly, "Get lost. Get lost. Get lost." His voice was like thunder, and it suddenly exploded. The terrible pressure of divine sense instantly fell. Puff! The beastmasters' faces changed. Each of them spat out blood and lay on the ground, unable to move. They felt as if their bodies were filled with lead. It was as if they had taken a trip to the gates of hell. It's too horrible. What aura is this? Without any hesitation, the beast tamers began to flee like rats. They did not dare to stay for long, for fear that Bufang would kill them. They had seen with their own eyes how Bufang dealt with those foreign superhumans. They could not believe that there was such a terrifying chi cultivator in Jiangdong. Feeling the aura disappear, their ears became much quieter. Bufang continued to walk unhurriedly toward the rented house. Little Hu and Xiaopi were playing on his shoulders. Buzz, as he walked, Bufang sank into his spirit sea. His mind suddenly flickered, and he sank into his spirit sea. He floated there, and the god of cooking sets were floating there. Bufang came to the huge Qilin, who was sleeping soundly. It was the Qilin who had told him the whereabouts of the artifact spirits of the god of cooking sets. It should be the right thing to ask them now. Qilin, if the artifact spirits are sleeping on Earth, where are they? Bufang asked, frowning. His voice echoed, but the Qilin did not show any signs of waking up. Is the recovery of Earth's spiritual energy related to the sleeping artifact spirits? Bufang continued to ask. Suddenly, at this moment, the Qilin opened its eyes and stared at Bufang with its bell-like eyes. Take a guess, the Qilin said. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Aha ha ha ha. For the sake of your cuteness, Qilin, I'll tell you some gossip. The artifact spirits are sleeping in every corner of this world, and if you want to find them, you need a key. You have to find the key yourself. I'll tell you another gossip. These keys are related to the recovery of spiritual energy, the Qilin said. Bufang nodded. He didn't seem to want to say more. Before Bufang could ask, he fell back into a deep sleep. The snoring was so loud that the entire spirit sea was shaking. Bufang twitched his mouth and gave the Qilin a disdainful look. With a thought, he withdrew from the spirit sea. Find the key to the recovery of spiritual energy, Bufang pondered for a while. As he walked, he soon returned to the city. The sky was gray. It started raining again. Bean-sized raindrops fell from the sky. With a thud, they hit the ground and splashed. Spiritual energy evaporated from them and rose into the air. The recovery of spiritual energy was related to the key. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Then I should find the source of the recovery of spiritual energy. If I want to know, I have to find a professional. Bufang stood where he was, the rain drenching his clothes. Suddenly, an umbrella appeared above his head. It was an oil paper umbrella. Huh? Bufang was stunned. When he came to his senses, he turned to look at the person next to him. It was a gentle young man, dressed in an ancient-style robe, looking at him with a gentle expression. It's raining. It's not good to get wet in the rain, the young man said gently. Oh, Bufang replied with a straight face. Then, the young man's eyes fell on Little Hu in Bufang's arms. This Little Hu is so cute. The nine-tailed fox is a rare species. I wonder if you'll sell it, sir? The young man said. He stretched out a finger and teased Little Hu. The little fox snorted and turned away from the clown bag. No, Bufang said. Little Hu's morale soared. He turned his head, opened his mouth, and bit the young man's finger. Slash! The young man's face froze. He hurriedly waved his hand and tried to pull it out. A bite mark appeared on his hand. This Little Hu is very naughty. I'm Yu Go from Penglai. I want to buy this nine-tailed fox from you. A nine-tailed fox is a spiritual creature that doesn't appear in the world. Do you understand, brother? The young man said, rubbing his hand. Penglai? The immortal island of Penglai? Bufang raised his eyebrows. The legendary land of immortals? There have been legends of immortals in Hua on Earth since ancient times. Do those immortals really exist? So, are you an immortal? Bufang asked, looking at Yu Gu. Yu Gu smiled enigmatically. Clearly, Bufang was frightened by the name of the place he mentioned. Of course immortals exist, so? Are you going to give me the nine-tailed fox? Yu Gu chuckled. Shameless. Didn't you say you want to buy it? Why are you giving it to me? Bufang's face was expressionless. Yu Gu was speechless. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony, Yu Gu said lightly. He was a supreme qi cultivator. As a supreme qi cultivator, he had rushed here after learning about the nine-tailed fox. He had been nagging Bufang for a long time, and he was already impatient. He was different from those coquettish superhumans. He was a qi cultivator, and when he reached the highest level of cultivation, he would become a legendary immortal. Therefore, he had his pride. Freeze! Yu Ji's pupils constricted. He stretched out a finger and pointed at Bufang. There seemed to be a strange fluctuation of spiritual energy in the air. Bufang stood motionless with Little Hu in his arms. Seriously, I was just talking to you nicely. You made me do it. With the recovery of spiritual energy, ordinary people are much tougher now. How dare you talk back to an immortal like me? Yu Gu shook his head. He was not the same kind of person as Bufang. He was destined to become an immortal. The nine-tailed fox was an immortal spirit beast, so how could it be defiled by a mortal? With his hands clasped behind his back and an oil paper umbrella, Yu Gu reached out and grabbed Little Hu in Bufang's arms. The freeze curse was a Penglai immortal spell. Even superhumans could not resist it. Looking at Bufang's motionless face, he smiled faintly. He stretched out a finger and pointed at Little Hu's nose. Suddenly Little Hu, who had been motionless, opened his mouth and bit Yu Ji's finger, leaving another bite mark. Yu Ji's body stiffened. Ahem. I'm sorry, I was distracted just now. What did you say? Bufang craned his neck, turned to look at Yu Gu, and said indifferently, Chapter 1597. I'm sorry, I was distracted just now. Distracted my ass. Yu Gu felt that his worldview had been refreshed. The young man in front of him was not affected by his fixed curse? That was a Penglai immortal spell. Why was he not affected? Even an S-class superhuman would be controlled by it for at least 30 seconds. But the young man in front of him was not affected at all. The pain from Little Hu's bite on his finger did not seem so obvious anymore. Yu Ji's eyes widened as he stared at Bufang. His ethereal appearance seemed to have faded a lot. Little Hu loosened his bite, then turned his head and stuck out his tongue in disgust. Bufang rubbed Little Hu's head and looked indifferently at the man in front of him. A chi cultivator from Penglai? Bufang was really distracted and in a daze just now. When he returned to Earth this time, not only had spiritual energy recovered, but many strange things had also happened. These things made him a little suspicious and puzzled. The recovery of spiritual energy and the birth of superhumans were a little strange. But what about those chi cultivators? Chi cultivators were different from superhumans. In ancient times, chi cultivators should be related to the legendary immortals. There were many stories about immortals in Hua, including the Buddha of the West, the celestial court of immortals, and demons. Bufang wanted to find the sleeping artifact spirits of the god of cooking set. He had an intuition that the sleeping place of the artifact spirits must have something to do with these immortals. Therefore, the look in his eyes when he looked at Yu Gu became even gentler. The rain was still pitter-patter. Holding the oil paper umbrella, Yu Gu took a few steps back. With every step he took, the water filled with spiritual energy splashed. The rain kept dripping down the edge of the umbrella, forming a hazy curtain of beads that blurred his vision. Who the hell are you? Yu Gu narrowed his eyes. The fixed curse did not work on Bufang, which made him a little confused. His original plan had been completely disrupted. No wonder he could tame the nine-tailed fox. This young man must have a big secret. Could he be a chi cultivator from another sect? Well, I have a question for you. Bufang thought for a while and asked. Yu Gu had already become very vigilant, so he did not dare to let Bufang get close. Bufang stepped forward. Yu Ji's eyes lit up. With a thought, he mumbled something and waved his hand in the direction of Bufang. Poochie! A white stripe shot out from his finger and smashed toward Bufang's body. Bufang did not dodge. Instead, he raised his hand and casually tore apart the white silk. Yu Gu, he was a chi cultivator. In the Esper world, he was equivalent to an S-class Esper. But in front of this young man, he felt like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. How many years had it been since he last felt this way? After cultivating in the Penglai Immortal Island for a long time, he thought he had made some progress in his cultivation. However, as soon as he came out, he ran into a tough opponent. Don't mess around. I'm just asking you a question. Bufang frowned slightly. This Yu Ji's method was much more brilliant than those Espers and Beastmasters. What shot out just now was an energy strike. It contained rich spiritual energy, which could be compressed into a solid form and turned into an attack. Perhaps this was the so-called immortal method. Bufang took a step forward. He was still holding Little Hu in his arms. Yu Gu was like a frightened bird. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and quickly retreated. He had already thrown the oil paper umbrella to the side. His long robe was still fluttering under the soaking of the rain. Buzz, he pinched his fingers together, and a warm sword light suddenly appeared, lingering around his body and whistling. Penglai sword finger. Yu Ji's eyes were very serious, as if he was facing the greatest enemy of his life. He had to bring the nine-tailed fox back, so a collision with Bufang was inevitable. Yu Gu despised this kind of existence who liked to pretend to be weak to eat the strong. Swoosh! A sword light pierced through the air and shot toward Bufang. Its speed was so fast that it almost surpassed the speed of sound. However, when it was 1 inch away from Bufang, Bufang caught it between his fingers. He exerted a little force, and the sword light broke with a cracking sound. A fine iron sword, broken into 2 pieces, fell to the ground. The atmosphere was a little stagnant at this moment. Yu Gu stared blankly at Bufang, his eyes wide. The Penglai sword finger was a real immortal method, and yet it was broken so easily? This man must be a brilliant qi cultivator. Yu Gu was terrified. He slapped his waist with his hand. Immediately, a purple gourd flew out, hovering in midair and spinning. Then, with a thought, the mouth of the gourd opened, and countless streams of sword energy poured out of it. Thousands of streams of sword energy poured down and enveloped Bufang in an instant. The abnormality that had occurred here had already caused many people to be terrified. What did they see? That flying sword energy, was it a special effect? This was a fight between immortals. People rushed to the scene and frantically took out their phones to take pictures. Yu Gu had no time to care about that now. The sword energy kept falling, slashing the soil on the ground and sending it flying. It was his sword gourd, a magical treasure used to subdue demons and devils. He was forced to use it by Bufang. If he couldn't suppress Bufang today and bring the 9-tailed fox back, his reputation would be completely ruined. Looking at the countless streams of sword energy, Yu Ji's eyes shone brightly. He believed that Bufang would never be able to resist them. Suddenly Yu Gu froze. He found that the rich sword energy was disappearing. It was as if it was swallowed by a whale. A silhouette appeared. In Bufang's arms, Little Who opened her mouth wide and kept gasping. The last wisp of sword energy also went into her mouth. Burp! Little Who burped, then contentedly found a place in Bufang's arms and lay down. The corner of Yu Ji's mouth twitched. How could the sword energy from the sword gourd be eaten? And what was going on with Bufang, who was unscathed? Bufang's face was indifferent. He had just wanted to ask a question, but now it seemed that he had to use force. The sword gourd, hovering in midair, spun. Bufang flicked his finger and flicked it in the air. The air exploded, as if it had turned into a bullet and shot out. With a thud, it smashed into the sword gourd, which instantly broke into pieces. Damn it, Yu Gu was dumbfounded. He looked at Bufang, who was holding the fox and had a mantis shrimp on his shoulder. Without hesitation, he turned to flee. After running into a wall several times in a row, he had clearly recognized the gap between him and Bufang. This inconspicuous young man was a god. He wanted to flee and go back to the immortal island of Penglai. However, as soon as he turned around, a terrible pressure fell on him. Plop! He somersaulted and fell to the ground. The terrible will that filled the air. Is that AF** King Divine Sense? Bufang walked up to Yu Gu. Facing this qi cultivator with a strong desire to live, Bufang chose to deal with him in a simple and violent way. Bam! Yu Ji's eyes were filled with horror. He opened his mouth to say something, but Bufang knocked him out. I'll ask him questions when he wakes up. The farce was over. The surrounding people's faces were flushed with excitement. Looking at Bufang's back as he left, they raised their phones, ready to upload the pictures to the internet. However, they were shocked to find that the pictures they had taken on their phones had become empty. Yu Gu woke up and felt something licking his face. When he opened his eyes, he saw a simple rented house. Where am I? What am I doing? What happened? After being asked 3 questions in a daze, Yu Gu finally remembered that he was now a prisoner of some people. Gurgle, gurgle. The air was filled with a strong fragrance. Yu Gu found that his stomach was growling when he smelled the smell. How was this possible? As a qi cultivator, he had long been accustomed to fasting. How many years had he been fasting? But now, he felt hungry. But it smells so good. Yu Ji's face was full of hesitation. He turned his head and found that Little Who was licking his face. The 9-tailed fox was a supreme-grade spirit beast, and his master had asked him to bring it back. Now, it seemed that he might fail. You're awake. In the distance, Bufang glanced at Yu Go, who had just woken up. With a shake of his hand, he flipped the dish out of the pot. The dish emitted a resplendent luster, overflowing with colorful lights, and a dense aura pervaded the air. It was cooked by Bufang with the ingredients in the system's storage space. Although his divine sense was suppressed and could not enter the farmland, he could still take out the things in the system's storage space. It was a simple bowl of dragon blood egg fried rice. A fragrant aroma filled the air, making people unable to control themselves. Bufang filled a small bowl and put it on the table. Since you're awake, come and eat. When you're full, I have questions for you. Don't struggle. You can't even beat my mantis shrimp. You're too weak. You go. Don't look down on me like that. He was a chi cultivator from the immortal island of Penglai, and his strength was very strong. Even if he was not as strong as the immortals in ancient myths, he was not much weaker. However, under Bufang's gaze, Yu Go got up. His legs were still a little weak. He crawled to the table and took a deep breath. The aroma filled the air. It smells so good, gulp. Yu Go swallowed. He looked at the simple egg fried rice in the small bowl. The blood-colored rice and the golden eggs shone brilliantly, looking very beautiful. At some point, Little Who had rushed to the table and was enjoying the dragon blood egg fried rice. As for Xiaopi, he was lying on Bufang's shoulder and blowing bubbles. Yu Go couldn't wait to grab a spoon and scoop up a spoonful of egg fried rice. With a slurp, the egg fried rice entered his mouth. The aroma that burst out in an instant and the delicious taste that made his tongue almost not made him sink in an instant. Slurp, slurp, there was only rice left in his eyes. He had never eaten such a delicious meal before. It was a feeling that moved him from the depths of his soul. One spoonful after another and another. Yu Ji's eyes narrowed. That small bowl only contains 3 spoonfuls of egg fried rice. He did it on purpose, didn't he? He must have done it on purpose. He's so evil. Bufang ate unhurriedly, not paying much attention to Yu Ji's reaction and the resentful look in his eyes. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yu Go leaned back in his chair and looked at Bufang bitterly. I didn't expect that one day I, Yu Go, would be conquered by a bowl of egg fried rice. But can you give me a few more spoonfuls? Bufang glanced at Yu Go. Then answer my question. Yu Go flipped his hair and looked at Bufang. Ask away. For the sake of the egg fried rice. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. What's going on with the recovery of Earth's spiritual energy? Bufang said lightly. As soon as he said that, Yu Go, who had been content, suddenly froze. Chapter 1598. Bufang's question was sharp. He directly asked about the cause of the revival of spiritual energy. Yu Go did not expect Bufang to ask this question. What was the revival of spiritual energy? What else could the spirit chi revival be about? It was just the revival of spiritual energy and the awakening of the whole world. Yu Go leaned back in his chair and glanced at Bufang. He found that there seemed to be a murderous look on the latter's expressionless face, which made his heart skip a beat. Has this strange young man discovered something? The revival of spiritual energy. Ahem. It's the revival of spiritual energy. I don't know where the spiritual energy comes from, but it has mutated the creatures on Earth, Yu Go said with a hollow laugh. This explanation was also a rather general one. Bufang looked at him indifferently, which made his scalp go numb. Xiaopi's straight compound eyes darted around, and its carapace was as sharp as a blade, exuding a chill that made Yu Ji's hair stand on end. Little Who, on the other hand, bared her teeth at Yu Go. The 9-tailed fox was cute to begin with, and when she bared her teeth, she looked even more adorable and pitiful. Don't beat around the bush. The revival of spiritual energy on Earth is not natural, but man-made. Anyone can see this as long as they're not blind. You don't have to hide anything anymore, Bufang said lightly. His words made Yu Gu feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. F***ck. Amazing. I can't believe he saw through me. How could this guy see through me? The revival of spiritual energy was something done by immortals, and ordinary people could not see through it at all. How could this young man tell him this secret? The revival of spiritual energy is the revival of spiritual energy. It's not as complicated as you think. It's just a carnival for all living beings on Earth, Yu Gu said with a smile. He wanted to calm himself down. But bam! Suddenly Yu Ji's pupils constricted. He found that his body was lifted up. The young man was still sitting calmly in his chair, looking at him emotionlessly. A furry object was tied around his neck. It was the fox's tail, and it was wrapped around his neck, lifting him up from his position. Little Hu lay on the table. One of his 9 tails grew longer and larger, wrapping around his neck. The originally harmless 9-tailed fox had transformed into a peerless, vicious beast in an instant. Speak. I'll give you 3 seconds, Bufang said lightly. It was not easy to find a qi cultivator. Bufang had to get some useful information from him. The spirit qi in the body of a qi cultivator was the same as the spirit qi in the spirit qi rain. There was no doubt that these so-called qi cultivators were responsible for the revival of spirit qi. Yu Gu struggled for a moment and patted Little Hu's tail. Then, he fell on the chair and let out a long sigh. He could not help but feel a sense of sorrow in his heart. To think that he, a genius qi refinement warrior of Penglai Immortal Island, was actually being tortured by a young man in the mortal world. It was a great sorrow. I say, logically speaking, with your strength, you shouldn't be unaware of this secret. Yu Gu cleared his throat and went on. He glanced at the expressionless Bufang. The revival of spirit qi is, in fact, a carnival organized by the qi cultivators of Hua and the chosen ones of the West, Yu Gu said. When he saw that Bufang was still unmoved, his expression became more and more strange. According to Bufang's strength, he was not weak on Earth. It was impossible that he did not know this secret. This was a major event of a global nature. It was fine if mortals did not know about it. How could a cultivator like Bufang not know about it? Was this Bufang an itinerant cultivator? Was he an old senior who had been in seclusion somewhere for many years? That was possible. With a 9-tailed fox and a strange golden mantis shrimp as a pet beast, he must be an old senior who had been in seclusion. He might even be an old senior from ancient Earth. At the thought of this, Yu Ji's face became solemn. A carnival? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, but he did not deny it. He motioned for Yu Gu to continue. Ahem. This carnival is not organized without a purpose. It's a preview of the real revival of spirit qi, Yu Gu said. His eyes narrowed slightly and seemed to become a little fanatical. The real revival of spirit qi? Bufang frowned. That's right. The current spirit qi revival is all an illusion. It is the result of high-level cultivators compressing spirit qi in the atmosphere and causing the spirit qi revival after the rain. This is fake. The real spirit qi revival comes from the inside of the earth. The scale will be bigger than this, and the effect will be more intense, Yu Gu said. As he spoke, he demonstrated it to Bufang. Do you know why? It's because our immortal predecessors have discovered that the spirit qi on Earth has actually been extracted and sealed in 4 major locations on Earth. Now we have discovered those 4 locations. As long as we go deep into the secret realm and open the arrays or barriers that seal the spirit qi in the 4 locations, Earth will usher in the revival of spirit qi. The more Yu Gu spoke, the more excited he became. Bufang, on the other hand, narrowed his eyes. The first place Bufang thought of was the sleeping place of the artifact spirit. Yu Ji's description of a place where spiritual energy was sealed was very similar to the place where the 4 artifact spirits slumbered. What are those 4 places? Bufang asked, frowning. Yu Go, who had been talking with confidence, suddenly stiffened, and a little shyness appeared on his face. I don't know about those 4 places. I really don't know. I'm just a little chi cultivator. How could I know such secrets? Yu Go said awkwardly. Chi cultivators are also divided into levels. When you cultivate to a high level, you can become an immortal. You should know about immortals, right? Don't think that those immortals in the myths are fake. They are real. Take the patriarch of the immortal island of Penglai, for example. He is a real immortal who can fly in the sky and burrow underground. He is omnipotent. In front of my patriarch, TSK, he can crush you with his little finger. Yu Go said. Bufang glanced indifferently at Yu Go. Who gave you the courage to say that? Immortals. They're existences that I've always dreamed of becoming. It's too difficult to become an immortal, especially in the era when Earth's spiritual energy is exhausted. If it were in ancient times, it would have been easier to become an immortal. Immortals are a general term. In fact, they are divided into Earth immortals, human immortals, and heaven immortals. Above heaven immortals are zenith heaven golden immortals and immortal kings. A yearning look came over Yuji's face. Yuji's words gave Bufang pause. There are so many levels of immortals? Why didn't I sense anything on Earth? It was impossible for the so-called immortals to remain silent. Also, who was suppressing his divine sense? Immortals certainly don't stay on Earth. Although they originated from Earth, unfortunately, Earth's spiritual energy is exhausted, making it unsuitable for immortals to cultivate. They all live in secret realms on Earth. According to my patriarch, those secret realms should be other planets in the universe. There are only a few immortals left on Earth now. Yu Go said. After saying that, he stopped talking. His face was a little dark, for he had accidentally said too much. Perhaps he was subdued by the senior's temperament. Bufang thought for a while, then suddenly stood up. There was no need to think too much about other things. As for perfected golden immortals and immortal kings, Bufang was too lazy to think about them. All he wanted now was to find the sleeping artifact spirit. Suddenly, Yu Go felt a weight on his shoulder, and he found that Bufang had put his hand on it. Senior, what are you doing? The corner of Yuji's mouth twitched. Was the senior going to silence him after he finished talking? Do you really not know where the 4 great spiritual energy seals are? Bufang looked at Yu Go. The next moment, his divine sense surged, and a powerful pressure fell on him. Yuji's face darkened. Sure enough, this black-hearted senior is really going to silence me. No. I know a few clues. Yuji's face darkened. The killing intent was almost tangible, and it made his soul feel as if it had fallen into an ice cave. He dared not lie anymore. Speak. Bufang's words were concise and to the point. Ahem. Do you know about the World God of Cookery tournament that has been spreading like wildfire recently? Yu Go asked after thinking for a moment. The God of Cookery tournament? Bufang paused. What did this have to do with a chef's tournament? Let me tell you. This tournament is actually led by cultivators. Behind it are chi cultivators from Hua, God's chosen ones from the West, and believers of gods from some small countries. Think about it. Why are there so many cultivators involved in a chef's tournament? Because the first spiritual energy ceiling point is related to chefs. Yu Go said after thinking for a moment. Related to chefs? Bufang narrowed his eyes, and the corner of his mouth curved upward slightly. It seemed that his guess was right. The sleeping place of the artifact spirit was indeed the spiritual energy ceiling point. In the God of Cookery tournament, the top 3 chefs will be selected by those cultivators and brought to the spiritual energy ceiling point. Then, they will know where the spiritual energy ceiling point is, Yu Go said with a smile. He was intoxicated by his own wit. Very well. Arrange a chef's tournament for me. Bu Fong said. A chef's tournament? The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched slightly. His cooking skills would crush everything. There was no suspense. Yu Ge felt a headache coming on. This is not a senior. This is an ancestor. If you want to participate in the tournament, you should sign up. I'm a chi cultivator, not a chef. But when he turned his head, Little Hu's 9 tails were wagging, and the golden mantis shrimp was staring at him with gleaming eyes. The corner of Yu Ge's mouth twitched. Senior, the chef's tournament has begun. But if you want to sign up, there's another way, and that is to find someone from the State Supernatural Agency. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes. The State Supernatural Agency in the suburbs of Jiangdong. In a secret base, Chief Luo slumped into a chair, exhausted. His mind was in a mess. The 9-tailed fox had been taken away. Judging from the strength of that young man, he should be a chi cultivator, and not an ordinary one. He could freeze bullets. Could he be an earth chi cultivator? Chi cultivators were divided into heaven, earth, profound, and yellow. An earth chi cultivator was equivalent to an S-class superhuman. As for the heaven chi cultivators, they were comparable to earth immortals. Chi cultivators of that level were also walking around the earth? Was this a good thing or a bad thing? Chief Luo was very tired. In front of him were a number of computers. Each computer was flashing with text, as well as some photos and information. Xiao AI, wearing glasses, walked in from outside with red eyes. Chief Luo, I found it. Information about that guy, said Xiao AI. When she mentioned that guy, she almost gnashed her teeth. How dare he knock me out? Chief Luo straightened up and looked at the computers. Beep, 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 photos and text appeared one after another. The photos were of Bu Fong, and the text was of Bu Fong. An apprentice chef? The corner of Chief Luo's mouth twitched. Was this information serious? How could an almighty expert comparable to a heaven chi cultivator be an apprentice chef? Xiao AI, are you sure the information is correct? Chief Luo asked as he looked at the information. Suddenly, he found that Xiao AI, who was behind him, did not answer him, which puzzled him. All of a sudden a fair, slender hand rested on his shoulder. Looking at the slender palm, Chief Luo's eyes narrowed. He turned his head and saw Bu Fong's expressionless face. As for Xiao AI, she was held down by a young man in a traditional Chinese costume with a smile on his face. Xiao AI's movements seemed to be frozen in place. You. What are you doing? This is the State Supernatural Bureau. Don't do anything stupid. Chief Luo said quickly. Bu Fong glanced unhurriedly at the information about him on the computer screen. The information was correct, but unfortunately, it was all from his past. Don't be afraid. I'm here to ask you to do something for me. Bu Fong pulled over a leather chair, sat down, and looked indifferently at Chief Luo. Do you know about the World God of Cookery tournament? Bu Fong asked, looking at Chief Luo. I need a place in the tournament. You should be able to do that, right? Chief Luo froze. What did he mean? He glanced at the chef marked in the information, then at Bu Fong, who had asked him to help him get a place in the tournament. Was this awesome chi cultivator really AF * King Chef? Chapter 1599. The World God of Cookery tournament was held on a huge cruise ship. The Jewel was the name of the ship. It weighed nearly 100,000 tons, and it looked like a behemoth anchored at the edge of the largest port in Hua. The ship was crowded with people. In front of the boarding ladder of the cruise ship, there were staff in exquisite suits checking boarding passes. The cruise ship, Jewel, was very famous in the world. Because the World God of Cookery tournament was so important, the cruise ship was activated. Of course, it was also because the tournament had a profound background. The people on the cruise ship were bustling. In addition to the teams of participating chefs, there were also some business tycoons and influential people boarding the cruise ship. Some of them came for sightseeing, while others came to taste delicious food. The World God of Cookery tournament had long become the focus of the world, and it had caused quite a stir recently. It was a competition that gathered the world's famous chef. Moreover, the champion would get a prize of 100 million yuan and a mysterious gift. That was why the tournament had attracted all the famous chefs in the world, making it the grandest cooking competition in the world. On the boarding ladder of the cruise ship, there were people of all skin colors: black skin, white skin, and yellow skin. Contestants from various countries boarded the cruise ship. There were chefs from the West, Hua, and many other small countries. They were not only participating for the ranking, but also for the high prize money. "Sir, please wait. Please show me your boarding pass." An Asian man in a suit and leather shoes, wearing headphones and a black metal pistol at his waist, stopped a few people in strange clothes in front of him. There was a young man in a traditional Chinese costume, a young man with a fox and mantis shrimp, and a girl holding a notebook. The lineup was so strange that the security guard had to pay attention to them. Xiao Ai was speechless. Why was she sent to this cruise ship with Bu Feng and that strange man? What kind of cooking competition was this? She was a woman who wanted to become a top superhuman. How could she waste her time in this cooking competition? However, she did not dare to disobey Chief Luo's order. So, she had to bring Bu Feng and that strange young man here. Xiao Ai, who was wearing a pair of suspenders, took out 3 identification passes from her belly pocket. He handed the certificate to the security guard. The security guard took it suspiciously, glanced at Bu Feng, Yu Go, and Xiao Ai, and finally nodded. "Please board the cruise, but sir, your pet is not allowed to be brought on board." The security personnel looked at little Hu on Bu Feng's shoulder and frowned. Why?" Bu Feng asked expressionlessly. "Your fox pet, we're not sure if it's vaccinated, infectious diseases, etc., so please leave it with us for the time being." The security guard said. Then how did that dog get in?" Bu Feng raised his finger and pointed at the golden retriever in the arms of a lady wearing a mink coat in the distance. "That's a pet dog." The security personnel were speechless. "This is a pet fox," Bu Feng said. Little Hu stuck out his tongue and acted cute. Xiao Ai rolled her eyes. "Pet my ass. That's a ferocious spirit beast. A 9-tailed fox. It's equivalent to an S-class highly dangerous spirit beast." The security guard was a little confused. Yu Go was already impatient. "Senior is really easy to talk to. He can even talk to these mortals for a long time." He raised his hand and shouted, "Freeze!" In an instant, the security guard was frozen in place. Yu Go raised his head and took the lead to step onto the cruise ship. A group of people followed him. In Yu Ji's view, cultivators like them could do whatever they wanted. Heavens! This cruise ship! Xiao Ai boarded the ship, turned on her laptop, and suddenly exclaimed. The computer made a beeping sound. She looked at it and found that the screen was densely packed with spiritual energy points. There were so many superhumans and cultivators on this cruise ship? On the contrary, the 2 people next to her, Bu Feng and the strange young man, did not have any spiritual energy points. Isn't there a cooking competition on this cruise ship? Why are there so many superhumans taking part? Xiao Ai's exclamation seemed to attract the attention of many people. In the distance, a beautiful woman in a bright red dress glanced over with a glass of wine in her hand. She pursed her red lips slightly. Many people also noticed Xiao Ai. She was a member of Hua's state supernatural agency. This identity was destined to make her the focus of many people. However, Xiao Ai's strength did not attract many people's attention. She was just a C-class superhuman, a weakling. Only the 2 men next to her paid attention to her. She could not sense any spiritual energy points, so she did not attract too much attention. Xiao Ai covered her mouth. She knew that she seemed to have attracted the attention of many superhumans, some from the West, some from Sakura, and some other countries. Here, she needed to be careful with everything she said and did. Heavens! Is this really a cooking competition? Why are there so many superhumans? Xiao Ai asked Bufang and Yu Gu in a low voice. No wonder the state supernatural agency had a quota. With so many superhumans on the cruise ship, the agency must have a quota. Didn't your chief tell you? Yu Gu gave the somewhat adorable girl a strange look. Xiao Ai paused. Tisk, tsk. Poor girl, Yu Gu clicked his tongue, looking like he deserved a beating. After that, he stopped talking. A group of people walked on the cruise ship. The cruise ship was very big, weighing nearly 100,000 tons. It was simply a behemoth on the sea. Toot! Toot! The ship started clanging and the whistle pierced the sky. Then, the huge ship slowly left the port and rushed into the vast sea. The interior of the ship was more than 20 stories high. Bufang and the other two walked in the ship and came to the waiting area. The god of cookery competition had attracted many world-class chefs. Of course, in addition to them, there were also some ordinary chefs. These chefs were naturally attracted by the high prize money. However, these ordinary chefs had to go through countless cooking competitions before they could board this ship. Every chef's face was full of confidence and fighting spirit. They wanted to win the first place and become the champion. Of course, compared to the ranking, the prize money of 100 million was more attractive, not to mention the mysterious gift. Not only chefs participated in the competition, but also teams of chefs. In fact, few chefs participated in the competition alone. Most chefs came in teams. The teams of chefs cooperated well, and they cooked in an orderly manner. Bufang and the other two were sitting in a corner. The waiting floor was beautifully decorated, worthy of being a world-class luxury cruise ship. Neon lights flashed, and melodious songs lingered in the air. On the waiting floor, many people in suits and gowns were dancing. There were also all kinds of wine and food on the table. Yu Gu was so excited that he went around to eat and drink. Xiao Ai, on the other hand, sat at Bufang's side and stared at him. The task Chief Luo gave her was to keep an eye on Bufang. However, Bufang did not do anything. He just sat lazily in a chair and quietly waited for the competition. The melodious singing had nothing to do with him. Bufang spread his divine sense and scanned the whole floor. In fact, among so many chefs, there were not many superhumans and chi cultivators. Even if there were, they were not chefs. The chefs were ordinary people, but there were superhumans in the team. It seemed that this world god of cookery tournament was not that simple. Beautiful lady, can I have a dance with you? Just as Xiao Ai was fiddling with the computer, a gentle voice rang out. A handsome man with blonde hair and blue eyes, dressed in a well-ironed suit, came to Xiao Ai. He held out a hand gracefully, looked at her with a smile, and asked in fluent Mandarin. Xiao Ai was stunned. She blushed when she saw the handsome young man's face. So handsome. Go ahead, Bufang said lazily. The golden-haired, blue-eyed youth nodded at Bufang and smiled. Bufang closed his eyes, his face expressionless. Xiao Ai blushed and was pulled away by the young man with a confused look on her face. Bufang was much quieter now. Suddenly, the sound of high heels rang out, and the alluring smell of perfume filled the air. A woman in a bright red dress swayed her waist as she came. The dress had a slit at the thigh, revealing her long white legs. It was very charming. Her breasts rose and fell, stunning people's eyes. Handsome, can I have a dance with you? The woman came to Bufang and asked softly. Her Mandarin was a little bad, but she spoke with confidence. However, after she finished speaking, Bufang was still sitting there motionless. The woman's face froze slightly. The woman glanced at little Huli and Mantis Shrimp, who were lying on the young man's shoulder, and a strange look flashed in her eyes. Her red lips curled up slightly, and she continued to speak. Bufang opened his eyes. What did you say? Bufang asked with a straight face. Can I have a dance with you? The woman's eyes seemed to flash with pink light, and she kept blinking. Her bad Mandarin exuded a sense of charm. This young man was with the man from the Special Abilities Bureau of Hua. As an ability user from Sakura, this woman naturally had to come to gather some information. Sakura had received information about the World God of Cookery tournament. They had to let their chef win the championship, so she naturally had to be fully prepared. She was very confident in her charm ability. This man would definitely listen to her obediently and spill everything out. "What's wrong with your eyes? Is there sand in them? Why do you keep blinking?" Bufang asked. The woman was speechless. How was it possible? How could this man not be affected by her charm? "Sir," the woman still wanted to say something. Suddenly, she found that Bufang's eyes had become very deep. She felt as if she was facing a chaotic starry sky, and her whole body sank into it. Her cheeks suddenly turned red, and she couldn't help but clamp her legs together. She vaguely found that her mouth was saying something, but she couldn't remember what she said. When she came to her senses, she was already far away. And that young man had already disappeared. The woman was dumbfounded. What just happened? What did she say? Why did she feel so tired and powerless? Sakura? How dare a small country covet an artifact spirit? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. With him here, even an immortal king would not be able to touch any artifact spirit. In the distance, the host had begun to announce the start of the God of Cookery tournament. Yugo came back with a satisfied look on his face, holding a cake. As for Xiao Ai, she came back with a red face and a drunken look. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. This World God of Cookery tournament should be very interesting. It had been a long time since he had encountered the delicacies of Earth. He suddenly had a lot of interest in this tournament. On the 20th floor of the luxury cruise ship, the whole floor was filled with stoves and cooking desserts. The neat rows of stoves were quite a visual impact. One by one, chefs dressed in neat chef robes and their chef teams stepped onto the stoves meticulously, standing in their respective positions. These chefs came from all over the world. There were Hua chefs, Western chefs, and, of course, some chefs from small countries. However, their distinguishing feature was obvious. They were all dressed in neat chef robes. Bufang stood in front of his stove. He looked down at the denim jacket he was wearing, which was something he had found in his rented room. As for Xiao Ai, she was wearing denim suspenders, and Yu Gu was wearing a flowing traditional Chinese costume. Their combination, in the midst of a large group of neat and clean chefs, was indeed a little weird around them. Indifferent and disdainful gazes fell on them. Why did any Tom, Dick, or Harry come to participate in the World God of Cookery tournament? Money was really tempting. The 100 million reward had attracted all kinds of people. A crisp sound rang out. The World God of Cookery tournament had begun. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.